like you used to know exactly what the Republican Party was going to think. Now it's like, what does Trump think? Now I know what the Republican Party is going to think.
I believe a lot of it's just used as a way to get us to not think about our infrastructure issues, to not think about our drinking water having lead in it. If you look at an algorithm assessment of X, the day that Elon Musk announced that when he endorsed Donald Trump, the algorithm started boosting right-wing stuff like 5 to 1, 6 to 1, 7 to the time that you see somebody on like, X or somewhere calling someone, the DEI mayor or the DEI CEO or something, many of those cases you could just replace it with the N word and it would mean the exact same thing. Like there is no difference. When I read the United Healthcare CEO news, like I had this weird crisis because my first thought was, like a lot of people, I was like, good. Like that was my first thought, And I was like, whoa, why is this okay to me? And I guess after thinking about it a lot, it's like, what percentage of people in a younger age demographic think that marijuana should be legal, that people shouldn't be busted for marijuana? Or what percentage of people think that like we shouldn't have as many middlemen telling us, for-profit middlemen telling us if we can or can't get health care? And like, and we all believe that, and these people vote, and we feel very strongly, and we never get change. And so then eventually somebody votes with their gun, and we actually feel some form of like justice served, even though it's not justice at all. But on the other side of that, it sounds very weird to say, but like I thought about like, okay, so after Trump won, how many people, and this is a difficult thing to talk about, but how many people considered committing suicide? Like how many people like, so do you want me to?
No, keep going.
Okay.
I'm walking in front of your camera like an asshole. You're good.
How many people like think about like marginalized people? Like I have some friends who like were very depressed, and not because like they're weak-minded, but they were very depressed because they're trans or they're marginalized in a way, and they're like, life's going to be a lot worse now. Things are going to get even worse, whether that's true or not. And in a weird way, it's like, it's almost like a different option. It's like you could become militarized against this person instead of taking your own life, which is just as risky and hopeless for you. But in a weird way, that feels like hope to some people. Does that make any sense? Am I like just...
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, I mean, like you're essentially like, if something is so bad and the situation is so terrible, it seems like some people are trying to resolve that by suicide, right? And thinking about suicide, whereas others often resolve that by kind of radicalization and mobilization, specifically violent mobilization a lot of the time, because there's very much that feeling that if we can't get anything through, or if we can't get the results that we need through the right sources, then the only option at that point, like when is political violence justified, right? That's like fundamentally like the question. And it feels like there is something, I think a lot of people do feel more hope in like that like militarized way. It's definitely like more hope-pilling, but it's also, it's interesting if you look at the demographics of who is going to lean towards being suicidal versus who's going to lean towards like radicalization, and probably a lot of the precursors that predict which pathway people are taking.
Well, yeah, I think getting back to kind of where you were talking about, like, we should change the laws and not be angry at the cops. I would say there's instances where we do need to change the laws, but there's also instances where we need to change the way cops behave. Qualified immunity being a good one, right? Like that is a legitimate reason to want to change policing, to be angry at the way policing is set without being set the weed, We do need to change these laws. But when you get into things like the Mangione, the healthcare CEO shooting, I think what it speaks to is, I think what you're saying is hopelessness. Like people don't feel like they have hope, and they feel like the only way they can express that is either through harm to themselves or harm to other people. And I think that's the kind of lesson that I take from this is like, of course I don't condone shooting anybody. I don't condone violence. But I think what we're seeing here is we're seeing a kind of a hopelessness from a lot of people in this country, and they don't know what vehicle there is to improve those things. And I think part of that is our political system is so busted. It's so just hyper partisan, and that people feel like neither fit me. I don't really have a place. There's no way for me to fix this within the legal means, and so they get desperate. And that's what I'm getting out of this whole Mangione thing, is that And I say this as a libertarian who does not want single payer. I don't want a government take over healthcare. But yeah, our healthcare system sucks, and it provides a lot of misery for a lot of people. And in that system, it's going to create a lot of hopelessness. There's got to be ways we can improve upon that and not shoot at people to actually improve things. And I think there are things we can do across the spectrum, libertarians and non-libertarians and all across the spectrum to make our healthcare system better and not just shoot at people.
I think that one of the big issues is that I argue that I think that our political system is actually incredibly effective. I think what the political system is doing, though, is it's showing like a real division in people. One of my biggest things that I get frustrated with is I feel like sometimes there's a lot of misplaced anger. Like if there was just a different way of expressing something in our political system, it would be better. But I think that legitimately, it's not like a bunch of Americans are unified on a whole bunch of things and then the political system is just not having those like bear fruit. I think there's a lot of genuine, huge division in the United States, and I think that gets expressed in our political system, that we think sometimes that we have more union around certain political topics, but we'll like conceptually be in agreement. But then when you start to like iron it out, we're actually in complete and total disagreement. And then what you get is you get a bunch of people who are directing anger at a particular place, and you've got a bunch of people in my field, political pundits and everything else, who are here to monetize anger. Because, I mean, let's face it, if you've got friends, like gossiping about shit is a whole bunch more fun than problem solving or troubleshooting. Sure. And then all it is you go on the radio, you go on the YouTube, you go on TV, and you just complain and complain and complain and complain, and then say everything is horrible and terrible, and then you don't give people like a realistic path to change anything. And it's like, of course, like people are feeling hopeless. Like it's literally the feeling that you want to breed in people because it's what's the most easy to monetize. It's not sexy to say like, go out and vote. But it's really sexy to say, like, we need to rise up and fight and kill these people and blah, blah, blah. Yeah.
It's one of the things I had to do running for office is not just say, everything sucks. Yeah. Everything sucks and it's terrible, vote for me. Because nobody does that. Nobody will go, oh, that guy clearly sees that everything sucks, so we should vote for him. No. I would say, this is a problem and here's how we can fix it. And that's how I'd have to run for office, because especially if you're running outside of the two-party system, if you don't have solutions, you don't have ears listening to you. Yeah. Because everybody hates taxes. Oh, great, taxation is theft, cool. What are you gonna do about the taxes that are being taken out of pocket, buddy? Or, hey, war sucks, but what are you gonna do to make the world more peaceful, man? Like, if you don't have the second part of that, you're not doing anything. You're just complaining. You're just putting negativity out in the atmosphere for no good reason, and oftentimes it just creates this kind of siloed thinking.
Scott Alexander, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Slate Star Codex or anything, the writings from him. He's got this really interesting article that's called Criticisms of Criticisms. And he identifies this kind of like cyclical pattern that often occurs in large societal rhetoric, where there's kind of this startup rising criticism that tends to be really low resolution, that embodies an emotional feeling of society. And it's a criticism of a system, and it tends to be really low resolution. And then over time, it'll either get hijacked, but oftentimes he talks about how there might be like a solution. Oftentimes the solution is bad policy. A lot of the time it actually is bad policy that comes out, right? Because it's often very emotionally driven policy. And then there'll be kind of like this lull, and then people will begin to feel frustrated once again, because a lot of time the policy that we have doesn't solve all the problems, but also there is a lot of misattribution of arousal, where people are often looking externally to the government and others around them for the source of their misery, when the source of their misery is probably like their loneliness, lack of meaning, and like their mental health. But one of the things that he brings up in this article is talking about how it's really important to have criticisms that are effective criticisms, right? But nobody wants to stick around for that conversation. It's really, really hard to get into like the nitty-gritty of being like, okay, well, if systemic racism is real within private companies, if that's occurring where people who are culturally maybe not part of the hegemon, they're not culturally as white American, they're getting kind of bypassed in various promotions and stuff. If that's true, how do we see it? How do we find it? Because if there's a way that we can shift it, I think most people would be on board for that. But the work that it takes to kind of parse through all the data and figure out these really subtle problems is incredibly difficult. And I feel like we've solved a lot of the simple problems in North America. I feel like a lot of the simple problems of like women are dying in birth, like we're like, okay, well, we should get cleanliness and improve our medicine. But now we have problems of being like, okay, well, even though the economy is really, really strong, people feel squeezed because housing is pretty unaffordable and accounting for a larger portion of people's budget than it ever historically has, which is why even though the economy is good and people are making more money than they ever have, they actually feel more monetarily squeezed. But how do you exactly improve that? Because the housing market is really complicated. It's really hard to know the best way to improve that based on like supply and demand.
Yeah, well, two things. One, I will say I love that the simple problems like the basic things like food and sanitation and water, pretty huge things that we have overcome in this country and that we enjoy, that in many places in the rest of the world, they don't have that security, right? That's that kind of North American mindset that we have, like, hey, we turn on a faucet and water comes out most of the time. It's clean water compared to a lot of places. So you're right, we've gotten a lot of the quote unquote the simple things done, like the basic building blocks. And now we're arguing over a lot of nuance and you're right. And I think there is no silver bullet for every issue. There's a million ways to solve a problem. And some of those things can be over-engineered and screwed up and ultimately create other problems on the back end, or something can be very streamlined and very direct and fix the problem, but maybe not address other concerns around that problem. There's a lot of different ways to fix things. And I think one of the things we lose when we discuss policy, especially when we get so emotional about it, is that generally, you were saying there's a lot of huge differences between people, but I would argue that most people generally, their interests are nearly the same. They want safety, they want security, they want to see their family do well, and then it's a matter of like, well, how do we view the rest of the world? And that's where the differences come up. And for me, I don't know if there's a way to make our politics friendlier. I wish it were, because we might get more things done if we had conversations just like this. Like if elected leaders actually had the ego to go, I'm not right all the time, and maybe I need to sit with people who are different than me and see a different perspective. You just don't get that.
That's DEI.
Yeah, well, for me, I'll tell you, this is with the wildfires coming up. This is one of the things I have a problem with. Just because the fire chief is a gay woman doesn't mean she's a DEI hire. Now, are there situations where there's quoting and things like that, and you can have a problem with that? Traditionally, that's been a thing. But I am tired of seeing it used as shorthand. For anybody who just is outside of the traditional norm of a job, well, that must be a DEI hire. No, my black chemistry professor or my black chemistry teacher when I was in high school was not hired because of DEI. He was hired because he was a guy who liked chemistry and he went to school to teach it, and that's what he did.
Most of the time that you see somebody on X or somewhere calling someone, the DEI mayor or the DEI CEO or something, you could in many of those cases you could just replace it with the N word and it would mean the exact same thing. Like there is no difference.
Well, for some people, sure, and for some people, I think that they think DEI is in every city and it's this prevalent thing. To me, it's just a different way of saying like increase the amount of our workforce and the inclusion of our workforce. Like it's a different way of doing it, and I understand DEI can mean a whole lot of different things, but for me, it shouldn't mean, hey, there's someone who's a woman doing a job that men traditionally do. That must be DEI Thomas Sowell, when he would argue against affirmative action, would use the idea of, I don't want people to think I'm a college professor because I'm an affirmative action college professor. I did it on my own. I worked really hard at it. And I think it discounts a lot of people who work really hard in a lot of fields, who have nothing to do with social policy or politics or anything. They just grew up going, I want to be a firefighter. I don't care if I'm a girl.
Also, like DEI, the way that we're using it in like the way that it's in popular culture right now and the way that it's being villainized, a lot of people don't realize that it's coming from capitalism. It's not necessarily coming from civil rights. Like there's plenty of economic studies that show that having a DEI program increases profit at the end of the day. And it makes sense. Maybe having a Japanese woman on our force, to her different cultural perspective, will actually add value to our overall workflow and make things more efficient, because she'll think of ideas that all these white dudes couldn't think of. And it's not about being. It has nothing to do with being woke or even doing the right thing.
It's about making money for them.
Right.
For them, it's about making money.
Exactly. And so when you see companies like Meta getting rid of their DEI, it's just like, what are you doing? This isn't. Nobody's forcing you to do this. You're actually making more money from it, especially with something like social media, where that would be actually important because you want to advertise to people from all of these different demographics.
Well, and I would think, market-wise, if it shows that getting rid of that program creates losses or creates lower gains, you wouldn't be surprised to see something like that coming back eventually. Business reacts to dollar money dollar, right? And for me, like, I can tell you a real world example of a workplace that's very diverse that I worked in. I worked in maritime trade, moving goods from one part of the world to the other. It's very important that we have people from all over the world working in our offices because we are on a 24-hour, the ships never stop moving. They never stop going. The ports never stop. I mean, most ports are 24 hours, not in America, but like, goods never stop moving. And so you need to have a workforce from around the world and that can interact with people from around the world. We had people in my office in Atlanta who spoke Mandarin. Why? Because you might have to speak Mandarin to somebody, or Spanish, or French, or whatever. And it's good to have people from around the world who have that cultural insight into what's going on. That was a good thing for my business. Is it good for every business? I don't know, and I wouldn't, and I don't have the answer to everything. But I would argue that seeking out the best people many times is going to involve seeking out many people from many different walks of life who have many different perspectives to create an overall consensus of what's going on, especially if you're a giant multinational corporation. If you're a corporation that's got your hands in pots all over the world, it kind of is in your interest and will make you money to do that. So I don't think it all the time is this nefarious woke thing. I just don't. Now, that being said, hire the best people for the best job. I don't care where they come from. Like, that's, if I ran a business, my policy would be, I'm going to hire the people that are going to make me the most money.
Yeah, I think there's two huge things. Is one, I feel like people intuitively know this, but they turn their brain off for certain political things. So, like, a person will tell you, like, well, why are you opposed to mass migration? And they'll be like, well, if a bunch of people that look different than me and have slightly different cultures, you know, show up in these areas, the culture is going to change, and that's scary to me. And then it's like, okay, well, then we look at like a workplace. Don't you think that having a more diverse workplace, just in and of itself, assuming all the qualifications are better, that would probably be a bit better because you'd have different people No. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, so in some ways, it's like the most, like, representation is the most important thing. But then when it's an area that you feel differently about for other political reasons, like, well, no, actually, I don't think it matters at all if every single person working here is white or male or whatever. I think people should just get over it. It's not a big deal. It's like, okay, well, why is it that, like, if too many brown people come in, the representation and the culture and everything is so important there, but then, like, at the workplace, if every single person looks the same, well, now all of a sudden it's totally A-okay. That drives me insane.
The politicization of immigration breaks my brain to the point where it makes me a little bit conspiratorial. Like, it makes absolutely no sense. Like, I guess when you think about it, it's like we have. So first of all, like, the right, the people who are the most against immigration, or asylum or any of these things, they're the pro-capitalist party, right? So, like, capitalism needs one thing. That's economics 101. It needs growth. Like, without growth, capitalism dies. So why would you not want people of a lower social or lower economic class than you coming into your country to buy your shit and work for lower wages than what you're paying people now, and that money goes up to you? Like, if you're actually a greedy capitalist, that's a perfect scenario. And then on the side of rights and on the side of, like, I feel like an immigrant is like almost like a libertarian, one of the libertarian superheroes that I can think of in my head. But it's somebody who's said, I don't like the place I live in. I don't like my government. I don't like the pressures that I have here. I don't like the work conditions. And they walk through the desert hundreds of miles. They keep some of their family home. They trust all sorts of nefarious figures, and they walk through the desert and then come here where they don't even have any legal status. They say, fuck the law. I'm going to find a place to work, and I'm not going to pay any taxes. It's like a libertarian superhero. And for the entire right side of politics to be against that is just, it breaks my brain. I don't understand.
Well, that would be because conservatives aren't libertarian. That would be one of the reasons why. I would argue also that, remember, on the left side of the aisle, you get people like Bernie Sanders who are arguing against the H-1B visas too, because he says, well, it's just to bring cheap labor over here, and it's going to exploit American jobs, and it'll affect Americans.
Yeah.
It becomes very immigration tight when that stuff comes up. So I think it happens on the left or the right too. Nativism does. Now, when you talk about, like, why are these capitalists not wanting to bring people in? And they say it'll affect the culture. Well, here's the truth. American culture is immigrant culture. Like, our entire thing, the entire thing that makes us different from France and UK and everywhere else in the world, right? All of Europe, where they say we're European centered. No, we're not the West. We are different. The American experiment is different than all of old Europe. It's different than everywhere else in the world because we import culture. That's what we do. We import culture, we Americanize it, and then we export our culture around the world. It's what allows us to be the market leader. It's what allows us to be the leader in pop culture and in art and in all of that expressive stuff that exports itself around the world. It is a good thing. And so, like, I'm a libertarian who will always champion immigration. I know there are some who claim the libertarian moniker who don't, and I always question, like, why? You're like you said, these
could you
people are
possibly,
seeking a better life for themselves. They're doing it for themselves, and they say, oh, well, they're going there for food stamps. First off, most people who come here without legal status don't have the status to go get food stamps, and many times they're using a fake social security number that's paying into the system that they won't pay out of. So they're actually paying to just come here and work.
I was gonna say they're more than just the libertarian superhero. They're everybody's like fiscal superhero too, because if you've got a stolen social security number or whatever, you're paying, like, your taxes are having federal and sometimes state withholding, and you're not actually getting any of that back.
Yeah.
And like you said, economically, like, labor is one of your most productive inputs, or one of your most important, like, parts of your production is your input for labor. So why would you not grow this thing? And every single person in society basically is helped at some point. Like, the greedy billionaire is seeing a greater return on his portfolio. The 401k investor is seeing a greater return on his investments. The manager or the boss has a bigger labor pool to hire from for cheaper. If you're like a consumer, you're buying stuff for cheaper. If you're a person who just wants to get, like, you want to do some work around the house, you're hiring people. It's good to, like, this is helping basically every single person in society. And people are just like, but for cultural reasons and dumb stuff.
I guess
Same thing with tariffs. They do the same thing.
I would steelman, I guess I don't even want to steelman the anti-immigration position, but I feel like when we're talking about this, there has to also be the space of nuance where we talk about the fact that, like, for example, when you flood in a bunch of people from, like, the same culture specifically and you silo them into a specific area, right? So if you take a bunch of refugees that are from Uganda and you put them all in the same location, any person who does refugee work will tell you they typically have a really hard time actually, like, accommodating into the greater culture because they don't speak the language, and the resources in those areas are fully strapped out. Like, it's really, really hard. They might send their kids to school, but unless they're young enough, they're basically sending their kids to public school to get, like, kind of annihilated until they learn to speak the English language. It's really tough for their kids, right? And so you also have this, there's often this siloing that occurs with, like, high flooding of immigrant groups. And I do think that we, in America and in Canada, really mismanage how we bring in immigrants a lot of the time. I think I have understanding for the concern about immigration, but it's not because they're all rapists and murderers that want to take care of the welfare system, but mostly because I think it's a really poorly mismanaged system, right? I think it's better to be an asylum seeker a lot of the time than to come in legally in any other way, because it's very hard to come in and work doing low labor.
I think the solution is to completely streamline the process to come in here, so you don't have so many people needing asylum. But as far as, like, assimilation, I think what we've seen traditionally throughout American culture is there's typically a 3-generation cycle of assimilation. The people who come here initially might not know the language. They might form an enclave neighborhood, just like we had Irish and Italian and German neighborhoods in the past, right? Those people who came here, they didn't speak English, but their kids did, and their kids started ingratiating something. And by the time you get to the next generation, they are more Americanized than they ever were German or Italian by the time you get to that 3rd generation. And so what we're seeing, and what I think is actually a good thing, so I saw a meme one time where it's like, I saw a guy and he said he lives next to his brother, and I thought that was great until he realized he also lives next to his cousin and this other person. It's like, I realized the whole block is just a bunch of Indian people. It's like, yeah, they're taking care of each other. They're creating an enclave, and their kids are going to be born into an America. They're going to go to school. They're going to Americanize themselves. And by the time they have those grandkids, those kids are going to be more American than they ever were Indian. And, like, that's the cycle that I think we forget about oftentimes.
And we excel at it. One of the issues that I had when we spoke in our earlier conversation is the internationalizing of all the political groups is all these, like, everybody thinks they have, like, the same struggle, and they don't. So you get, like, these Brexiters and these, like, far right, like, Europeans that are like, oh yeah, like, America, and we're all in the same, like, Trump basket, and people want to share their concerns, but they're not the same concerns. Like, I think across Europe, especially after 2013 and the whole, like, collapse of the Syrian state, and on top of all the other problems related to European welfare systems and their taxation and everything else, like, they have legitimate issues with certain groups of immigrants that come in and will become siloed out or don't integrate well with the culture, or aren't able to work for complicated government reasons. Like, you show up and they don't allow you to work for a year. And those are real issues that those countries have to deal with, and they're real problems. No offense to my wonderful country of America, nobody fucking comes here to live off the welfare. It's just not that kind of country. You don't, like, unless you want to go to an emergency room, I guess, because that's for free. Like, nobody's coming here for our wonderful food stamps and the fucking Section 8 housing. If people are coming here, it's because they usually want to work. And I mean, like, to the example that you brought up, I was going to say this, like, on paper, if you were to just like make them not white. Like Italian immigrants were the worst possible thing of everything that you could think of, in that they came in fucking enclaves, they all lived together, and they all had their own little ghetto, like the word ghetto, I don't know if it wasn't a
Jewish,
but like,
I think
Jewish,
Jewish,
but like there were like Italian ghettos and like little Italy and everything else.
Yeah,
they had actual, not like whatever MS-13 is supposed to operate.
Actual organized crime.
Yeah, it was the fucking mafia. Yeah, it was like running sections of New York City. Like, holy shit. Like, every horrible thing, hiring family members, nepotistic. But these days, if you were to bring up, like, people laughed at, was it Chris Cuomo or was it the other guy the guy called him a Fredo or something? He was like, that's racism against Italians. I was like, can you be racist against Italians?
Yeah.
Because it's so integrated into U.S. culture. And there's still places like
there are still, I mean, like, I'm from South Chicago, and well, I mean, it is interesting because South Chicago is very immigrant strong, but very white immigrant strong. And that's sort of like the entire city takes pride in that. And the unions, you have unions where like it's all Polish plumbers and all Irish this and, you know, and I feel like there was a time in my life, it's probably not so much prevalent anymore, but there was a time in my life where like Italians were thought of as still a little greasy.
Just watch All in the Family from the 70s. Just watch the way Archie Bunker treats Italians and Polish and Jews and anybody else. They're all white today. Like, you would just look at them and go, white. And it's amazing how we shifted from a weirdly enough, a cultural like hatred of people who look like us to now it's like, oh, well, it doesn't matter that the language is the thing. The language and the skin color is now the problem. It's brown immigrants we don't like. We loved the Germans, the Polish, they built this country. It's like, you don't think Mexicans and Venezuelans and Peruvians and the Chinese, you don't think they can help build the next generation of America? Like, yes, they absolutely can. And it's a good thing. Like, first off, as a person who is mostly of Scot-Irish descent, I can tell you how boring our diets would be if we were just living with the UK, Scottish, Irish diet. Like, okay, there's only so many times I can eat shepherd's pie. Like, sometimes I like to experience other cultures. Hey, maybe I like to go watch a movie that's a Spanish language film or a French language film. Like, it expands your life to have more than just you around you.
Okay, I'm going to steel man some more. So the thing that you brought up with the Italian groups, I would agree that most people, when they're talking about immigration and they're using any like rhetoric that I gave before, they usually forget about history. But if I'm not forgetting about history, if I engage with that, then we'll be like, yeah, the Italian mafia was a big problem. That was really bad. It was not good that these things happened. In fact, sure, yeah, in 3 generations, they will be kind of just adopted into the greater American populace. That doesn't help me in this generation living right now, which is to the point of saying, you know, again, if I'm still manning, that is a problem. It is a problem that we're like managing immigration in this way. And, you know, you might argue like that's just how it is. That's just how it goes. But it feels like a kind of lack of acknowledgement of some of the problems that immigration brings for the people living there when it's managed in this way.
You know, I can understand economic woes and concerns. Like, I get it. Like, I can, while I don't think it's correct, I can empathize with people feeling that like immigrants are harming them in some way. Like, because a lot of these people who are anti-immigrant are not hateful. They're not just racist people. They have a feeling of economic concern. They think, again, they're going to take our job or this, that, or the other. And even if that's totally not true, but you do have to recognize that these people have these feelings and be able to parse it out with like, maybe your fears are a bit unfounded, or maybe we can maybe you want to go meet these immigrant communities. I think, for me, campaigning this year, Springfield, Ohio was like the center of an immigrant community that got all of the hatred. And let me tell you, the people who were the most stressed about it were the citizens of Springfield who were just trying to help the immigrants, because they were the ones who were getting attacked for being anti-American. You hate this country because you want to help people who aren't from here. Like, oh, and it just really made things even worse. And there were already problems. And anybody in Springfield, Ohio will tell you, and I talk to them, even people who help the immigrants, they'll say, yeah, our taxpayer services are stressed. Like, we are going through a lot because we've had a sudden influx. But we will get through it if people will stop distracting us and stop making this a national news story.
And this is the issue that I have, because on the left, I'm expected to fucking separate myself from every crazy radical fucking person in the world. Like, I'm a very pro-trans person, but there are a lot of fucking insane trans people online. And every time I talk about trans issues, I have to be so careful to separate myself from like, no, I don't think there should be like a 4-year-old, like trans woman, radical TRT wrestler athlete beating up other toddlers. We're like, I don't know what these people are talking about. No, I'm not part of that. But then on the conservative side, it's like, okay, you can tell with the way that somebody approaches a problem, whether they want to fix the problem or whether they're complaining something in a way that it's a mask for them feeling a different way about a particular thing, right? Like if you take a vote with a group of friends and you're trying to figure out what you want to order, and there's 11 of you and you settle on pizza and 2 people really didn't want pizza, and then you're trying to figure out, well, what do we want? And it's like, do you want pepperoni? No. Do you want cheese? No. Do you want vegetables? No. It's like, okay, you're not helping us move forward with this. You just don't fucking want any pizza. And now we can't do anything. And if you're a kind of guy who only wants a particular type of pizza and all of your arguments look like exactly the same as the guy who didn't ever want pizza at all, well, fuck, how the fuck are you supposed to differentiate? Like, the big issue that I have with a lot of conservatives is, like, I have never in my entire fucking life, not a single time, have I heard a conservative give a single, like, valuable piece of criticism towards our immigration system ever. Not once. The only thing I've heard is we need to close the border. We need to make we need to make legal immigration easier. Like, it'll be that with no details at all. And we need to kick out all the illegals from our country. It's like, okay, what do you have anything like constructive? Because the rhetoric that the standard conservative position right now gives is identical to the rhetoric of somebody who wants to wipe out every immigrant in this country, at least all the brown ones.
Yeah,
and they don't even do any work to separate themselves. And it's like, the fuck.
And they don't even have a plan for that. Like what, are you going to go door to door with guns and pull people out? Like, the average, like, MAGA immigration fantasy is like everybody being around, the people who are bussing tables and the people who are those are the ones that need to be, to go back to the country and come in the legal way, and they get rounded up. And I just don't understand why at no point is anybody saying, okay, so they're working under the table. Yeah, obviously, businesses are capitalizing from this by paying them under the table. They're making way less. Tax them. If we're taxing everybody else, why don't you tax them and allow them to participate in the economy that we're complaining about?
Or if you want people to go in the legal way, why not just create a system where within the United States where they're already here, they can start signing up for legal.
Yeah.
But if you're already here working, instead of rounding them up, using the cost to send them back home and then force them to go back through the legal way, just create the legal way in the United States. Just create an immigration, like hire an immigration paperwork processor at every post office in the United States and say, if you're here illegally, go here and start the legal process to be here. After 2 years, if you haven't done it, we will deport you immediately.
Sure.
And guess what? Every person will go to the post office and line up and sign up legally if there's a way to do it.
And just think about it, like coming in, like imagine, okay, we're going to deport you, and then you get deported and you come back, okay, what's the best proof that you could be in this country and work and contribute? And it's like, well, I was there for 6 years and I didn't commit a single fucking crime because I was an illegal immigrant. If I would have gotten caught, I could have gotten deported. So that's what I did. It's like, oh, okay, well then come back in, I guess. Like that, what better way to know if somebody could work here than if they have been for years and years and years? It's like, what the fuck?
And you're right about the conservative fantasy of like just wanting to pull people out and deport them. I mean, Brian Kemp, who's our governor, he won the primary and he was laughed at first when he was running the primary because he had a bus that he had put like, cages on the windows with like immigrant deportation bus, molesters and traffickers are going back home. Like he wrote all this crap.
And it kept breaking down, which is the best part.
It did break down a bunch.
It broke down
But
a
he
lot.
drove all over the state in the thing, being like, I'm going to round them all up and throw them all over the border.
And you fucking RoboCop? How do you know who the illegal even is? Like, what?
But that's
brown person.
Brian
That's what
Kemp
they're
is
doing.
Brian Kemp. But like that was literally a way that he, got votes in a Republican primary with that. When in reality, like, my immigration policy, which I think would make sense, is streamline the way people come in so we don't have so many asylum seekers. Because asylum should be for asylum. Asylum should be for I'm being hunted by my government and I got to get out of there, right?
Yeah.
And if we streamline the process, less people would do it. And then for the people who are already here, like I said, just make it a sign up at the post office. Put a kiosk out there and someone who speaks Spanish to help them file the paperwork. And guess what? You're going to get 90% of the immigrants coming through that post office to get some sort of legal status to work here. They don't come here illegally because they want to. They come here illegally because coming here legally is either expensive, time-consuming, or limited,
impossible.
quoted. Impossible.
It's
and so they go through the process of coming through here, living in a shadow economy. By the way, you want your neighborhood to be safer? Liberalize immigration. Allow these people to come out of the shadows so when a crime occurs in an immigrant-heavy neighborhood, they report it. Because right now, immigrants don't go and report the crime. Why? It's not because they love crime. It's because they don't want to get their name on a piece of paper and have an investigation happen and people realize they're not here legally. And so if you want to have safer communities and better neighborhoods and less stress on the police force, then liberalize immigration. And you'll see a lot of that happening in real time, very quickly, organically.
Yeah.
But again, that just requires human beings to think logically and not to think within their political silos and how can they best anger people to make money for their next campaign.
Well, I was
That's what a lot
going
of
to
this
say,
is.
I mean, this is maybe my psychology background coming out, and so maybe I'm wrong here, but I think a lot of people, when you talk about, like, think about it logically, I think we can actually talk about it emotionally. I think it's understandable to be frustrated of, like, fearing that there's rising crime. And as you, as like a random person, the main thing you're seeing is the difference is there's a lot of new people going on. I understand being, like, fearful of that if you have, like, kids and stuff like that. The issue is, like, emotions have to, like, be complemented with, like, like a good, like, wise mind in, like, therapy, like dialectical behavior therapy. It's like taking the emotions and being like, those are flags, like, those are good flags. The issue is, like, what your emotion says is true. It's often not true, right? Like, when you think that you're mad at your husband because he left his sock on the ground, it's like, maybe, or it's possibly because, like, your boss is an asshole and you don't like your job and you're stressed out and your kids are not doing well and you didn't get a lot of sleep last night, right?
Yeah, your pay has not risen with inflation. And so you're feeling the pinch every time you go to the grocery store and you think, oh, well, now there's immigrants who are in my community. They must be taking something from us. That's why it's harder for me. That's the problem, that we have to get people over this mental hurdle. You're right. You're absolutely right that people's own misery often has them taking it out on other people and blaming other people for things that are their own problem. Economic insecurity, or not their own problem, a problem of some other factor that's happening to them. I didn't get the raise I wanted, so I can't afford to live here anymore, or my rent went up. I have a friend who just had to move for the 3rd time in 3 years because every time he moves and he gets settled, the next year they raise the rent to a rate where he can't pay and he has to go find a crappier neighborhood to live in.
Yeah.
That's the reality for a lot of Americans, and that economic insecurity can manifest in insecurity about immigrants, insecurity about all sorts of things. And I think it's time that we, maybe self-reflection might be something we need to do more of as a people.
Well,
right?
I think like when I look at the Democratic Party and how it ran versus the Republican, right? Like Trump really ran on, like, the vented negative emotions, right? And the problem is that a lot of times when I listen to the Democrats, they'd be like, no, everything's really good. And I'm like,
Best economy ever.
in the broad scheme of things, things are really good. The crime is down, like all sorts of things are really good. But the problem is that when like you've got a listener who's feeling emotionally disconnected because, like, communities are falling apart and rent and cost of living, specifically with, like, rent and housing, is just too high. All it makes them feel is that the politician speaking is disconnected from them, which is true of basically all politicians, and that they don't care about them, right? And so when I look at the Democratic Party, who really ran on this, like, we're gonna keep going forward, I think it really didn't resonate with a lot of people because they're like, what do you mean? Like, things aren't going well, even though the reason why it wasn't going well was being co-opted by the only group willing to say it wasn't going well and getting blamed on, like, stupid things, right?
I think, a lot of it has to do with the way our media works. So, you're right. People feel a lot of unease about crime right now. They really have. I feel like there's so much crime going on. There's so much crime going on. There was a crime spike during the pandemic. That's what happens when people are desperate. They don't have a job and, the economy's in the shits. Like, people will start stealing more. That happens. Crime rises. But crime's been going down since the pandemic. We're actually on a downward curve and we're still near historic lows. I try to remind my dad and my mom, who are like of the age, they're boomers and they're watching the news and they're terrified all the time. And I live in the city, they live out of it. Oh, be careful when you're going to ride MARTA. It's like, I ride MARTA every day. Like, it's normal for me. But they're scared because they're in tune to a 24-hour news cycle that pumps you full of fear. And that's something that is still, and now it's not just the television news cycle, it's the streaming news cycle, it's the internet, social media. It's pumping us full of fear. And we're not seeing the fact that you were more likely to be mugged in 1985 than you are today.
Yeah. If you look at, like, crime stats from the 70s, it's insane compared to what it is now.
Look at
it's like
New York.
It's like apocalyptic levels where you're just like, I can't even imagine it being,
That crime bill didn't come from nowhere. It was, we were crazy. Yeah, it was insane. Yeah, but then, I mean, to your credit for the news stuff, but it sounds bad when you even point that out, that, like, you're not talking about the world that you live in. You're talking about the world that's being shown to you on TV. The examples I brought up earlier is, like, you got people in, like, fucking, like in Rust Belt states or in the north, like, complaining about illegal immigration, like you are personally seeing illegal immigrants everywhere, or people will talk about, like, crime is worse than it's ever been. It's like, Mom, when's the last time you got fucking robbed? What are you talking? Like, do you know any friends who have gotten? And they'd be like, no, or for the vaccine, my mom would be like, yeah, that's horrible, and all these people are dying. It's like, Mom, we have like 3 family members that died from COVID. How many gotten hurt from the vaccine? Like, what are you talking about, Mom? Where do you even see this shit at? Yeah.
It's echo chamber thinking that gets that to you too. You silo yourself into a group of people who think the same way as you do. You don't see that outside of you, and then media makes it even worse.
Yeah.
Oh, that's insane.
We had a hurricane here in Georgia, and I had a family member who I was, like, really begging to come. A family member's probably probably watches their share of Fox News a little too much, and I was begging them to come up here to you're literally in the path of, it's still going to be a Category 1 hurricane. Your infrastructure is not. They live in the middle of nowhere. It's like you're not going to be able to leave or come back. If a wall blows off, you're done for. And the reason they end up coming, but the argument was at looters. And I'm like, you have 100 acres in the what looter? Who's going to come? Oh, from Atlanta. What? So people are going to be walking through the storm to
You
loot
didn't hear about the looter?
No, they're going to take bird scooters. That's what they're going to do. They're going to bird scooter their way.
They didn't bird scooters the last time, but this time they actually come right on the backs of the oh God, what's the name of the federal agency for emergency relief?
Oh, FEMA.
FEMA. Yeah, they're coming on the backs of the FEMA trucks.
Okay, good.
Because they're coming because they have to steal your house.
Yeah.
They give you $750 and they don't tell you it's a loan secured by your house, and they take your house immediately. And then once they're taking the house, then the looters can come in and they can take all your shit.
There you go. Yeah, but I thought to myself, this is one of those first times. I mean, you could go back and forth with COVID, but this is one of the first times where it's like you're risking your life for something that's imaginary at this point. Like that's an actual life risk. Like you're doing what all of the experts are telling you not to do because you're scared of an imaginary thing that Tucker Carlson or Donald Trump told you exists.
Well, the whole immigration thing, the idea of looters is hilarious to me. I've lived in Atlanta when things have gotten pretty hairy. I was there during the George Floyd protests, and National Guard was on the streets, and we were getting pepper gas and tear gas and pepper sprayed and all that nonsense. And still, the looting was very to a minimum of what you would expect on that kind of a thing. The idea that Atlanta is just going to loot the whole state of Georgia. First off, half of them can't figure out how to get to South Georgia. Most people, a lot of people in Atlanta have never driven outside of Atlanta.
Yeah.
And secondly, why would they ever, why are they going to go loot Middle Georgia? All the nice stores are in Atlanta. No, my thing is it's an overblown fear.
Yeah.
And I get it a lot. Like I said, my parents are older and they live out in the country, and they have this idea that when I drive home to Atlanta, I'm driving into a murderer's row, or it's like Escape from New York out there. It's it's not really that bad, I mean, sure, there's some times you have a weird instance on the MARTA train, or sometimes the street stinks because they haven't picked up garbage in a timely manner. But for the most part, and especially Atlanta, very clean city. I've traveled to cities all over the country, I can tell you. I had a friend come from New York and be like, wow, Atlanta's so clean. I'm like, it can't be that much cleaner than New York. And then I went to New York City, I was like, holy crap, Atlanta is clean.
Yeah.
For a major city, so I don't know. The idea of looters in any city is most people who are looting in an emergency are grabbing food. Most of them are just grabbing what they need to survive, and desperate times will call for desperate measures. And you know what? Here's the thing. If I was a person who was living on the street and a hurricane happened and I didn't have no food and I was living in desperation, I didn't know what I was going to do tomorrow, I might do some crazy shit too. And maybe, just maybe, we need to not think about people as being evil for surviving. That's my opinion. And yeah, if you're walking out with a television, you're kind of an asshole. But you know what? I'm not walking out with a television, so I'm not worrying about it. And I don't own the store either, and hopefully that store has insurance. But you can't worry about every single thing ever going on, and you can't be outraged by everything going on all the time. Otherwise, you'll give yourself a heart attack.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of memes about California life, where it's you want to go to 7-Eleven, but there's a crackhead in front of it and stuff, and I'm just have these people ever seen a crackhead in real life? Because they don't just attack you. It's not a bear.
No.
Nope, they're addicted to drugs generally, and what they usually want is crack. Not
Yeah,
it has nothing to do with you.
They're also not having a great time. It's not those crackheads are just enjoying themselves, asking people for money outside of a store.
Yeah.
They're pretty desperate too, and maybe have a heart for them, and maybe for but the grace of God, that would be you. That's what I always think about when I see somebody who is living on the street, or who's living with addiction, or who's going through real struggles, is, but for the grace of God go I. That could be me. If just a couple of events happened, I wouldn't be a presidential candidate. I could be a guy who's living on the street begging for money.
Yeah.
One of my very probably unpopular pet peeve that I have is when people see somebody who might be an addict on the street or something, and then say, I'm not going to give them money. They're asking for money. I'm going to get them pizza. And I'm like, shouldn't make that decision for them. Like, I feel like that's taking away their liberty in a weird way. Like maybe they don't want pizza. Maybe they don't like pizza. Maybe if they're jonesing because they were addicted to an opiate or something, having a pizza handed to you is like the last thing you want because you'll probably throw up. Like, there's so many reasons why that we just assume that, like, well, I'll just buy them the cheapest thing and then give it to them. And I don't know. That's always been a weird pet peeve of mine. It's like, well, they asked for money, so give them money.
Yeah, I give people food if they ask for food.
Right.
But otherwise, if I have $1, I give $1 or whatever. I'm not going to question. Like, I'm not about to go, what are you going to buy? What are you going to buy with this $1? It's like, okay, if it matters that much to you, then just don't even offer them the $1. Just keep on walking and whatever. Like,
it matters to me. Listen, if I'm going to spend money on somebody getting drugs, I'm going to get drugs. Okay. So.
Yeah.
Right. But,
as an addictions go, I actually disagree pretty strongly with that, mostly because it's like, what if the money that you give them is more than they typically get, and it leads to like major overdose?
Well, I mean,
so,
you can't control everybody's life. And they're asking for money. I can't ask for personal history or how much is in their wallet. That's the thing. Is like, you just have to assume if you're helping somebody, you're helping them out. Whether, and you can't ascribe your own guilt to it. Like, if they go buy a bag of crack and they OD on it and they die, it's not your fault for giving them the $5 that allowed them to buy that.
It's not your fault. But I guess if I go back to...
We need way more money to OD on crack, everybody. Let's make this clear.
Sure. I guess I would go back to...
show you, like, my...
Yeah, we're talking like 2 8 balls.
If you care, I guess, if you care about a person, you care about them complexly, right? And so it's like, if they're asking for money, if you want to feel like a good person, probably do the thing that like helps them the most. So like, maybe don't assume that they get pizza, but typically what I'll do is I'll be like, hey man, I'm not really comfortable giving you money, but I'd love to get you like water or anything inside. What would you like? Right? That's typically what I'll do. And that's typically also what I encourage people to do, just because I think, this is such a can of worms, but just in general, I think giving them money, giving them bus tickets, these sort of things that they can like use to exchange for like dope, might give them like one more day where they're like not going into shelters that can like help them promote them getting off of drugs, or using the clean using sites, or like going and having another interaction with a social worker that might like get them into like safe housing and stuff like that. So in general, I actually encourage the public to not give them money, but I do encourage you to like talk to them, because most of them don't even feel like humans. That's the biggest thing you can do for them, or like help.
I feel like I would just starve. Yeah. I feel like if I asked somebody for money and they were like, I don't know if I feel comfortable giving this, but I'll buy a pizza, I'd be like, fuck you.
Yeah, right. It takes away your liberty a little bit.
I'm like, I will be hungry tonight, actually.
But I mean, also, it's like, if somebody, let's just say somebody is somebody's addicted to Oxy or something, right? And that's what they want the money for, and they're dealing with like terrible. I mean, they're dealing with like, not only does it feel like their entire body. Have you ever had like the pins and needles when a limb falls asleep? Your entire Apparently, I've never had an Oxy addiction, but apparently your entire body feels like that. You're nauseated, you have a migraine, you're having panic attacks, all that stuff. It's like, if my dower contributes to giving them another pill the same thing that they've been taking forever, like, I'm kind of willing to take that risk. It's like, I'm giving, that dower gives you so much more than the pizza, if that's what you want. Like, just when you think about the relief of actually getting another 8 hours of not having, depending on if it's extended release or not, if you're having like another 8 hours of not having to deal with that, that's like the best gift you could give them.
Well, yeah.
Sort of. I mean,
a little enabling though.
It's pretty enabling. I will say, I think you can give them your $1, but I think people that are not giving them their $1 are also potentially doing the right thing.
Oh yeah, I mean, they're trying to do good.
What I would actually say is, if somebody's asking for something, just talk to them. Like, one of the main things that a lot of these like homeless people have never experienced in like 2 to 3 years, they've gotten money and they've gotten food from people, but almost no one is willing to like stand near them and talk to them, because they like smell weird, they're kind of like spooky, right? So like, if you're gonna give homeless people anything, like, give them like your time and attention, and like talk to them like a human being.
So I'm gonna shout out a friend of mine's group here while we're talking about this. It's called Shred the Stigma. It's out in Oklahoma. He does harm reduction strategies for those who are suffering from addiction. And it's something that he's had to, and the head of this org has really gotten into it with people who are like absolute abstainers. Like, you got to get them completely off the drugs, right? And his thing is, no, if I can reduce the harm they're doing themselves by providing them clean needles so they're not spreading, intravenous diseases, or if I can provide them Narcan or fentanyl testing strips so they can at least test their product, or have Narcan if there's an overdose, like, that is still reducing the harm that's being done to these people. And eventually you're going to create a bond of trust. Like, what he said is like, the first time I would give out a kit to somebody, they're giving me a fake name and I'm meeting them in a park. The second time I'm meeting them at the bodega near their house, Third time, they give
They're
me the
in
real
prison.
name.
You got them. You turn them over to. No, I'm just kidding.
But third time, you meet them in their house with their real name. And maybe, just maybe, in 6 months or a year, when they're like, I want to get clean, they're going to go to, that guy that would give me the clean needles is an ex-addict, and he got himself clean, and he cares enough to like not judge me for using, but making sure that I'm doing it in the most least harmful way possible. That's the guy I'm going to reach out to. And so his organization has saved, I think it's over 1,000 lives with the Narcan alone in the Tulsa and Oklahoma City areas, but there's also dozens of people who have come out of addiction through this harm reduction strategy. And I think, it's something to think about, particularly with addiction, is, you don't want to just give them crack, right? But if you're giving them a clean pipe or clean needles or Narcan or fentanyl testing, you're still allowing them to make their own decisions about their own life, but you're doing so in a way that reduces the harm to the community, reduces the harm to that person, and ultimately will make that person eventually, if they do want to get clean, have a lifeline that they can trust, that they know is not judging them for being a user because they've allowed them to be a user for the full time that they've known each other. And I think that is a strategy that works great. And free plug here for anybody who's watching, Shred the Stigma in Oklahoma, I recommend they check it out. But any organization like that, I think, is one worth supporting because they do treat folks who are living on the street with decency and respect. They talk to them, they talk through their issues, they talk about what's going on, but then they also don't judge them for being a user because they don't say, because many times they say, these folks are like, situation could be flipped right now. I could be you, you could be me. And when you have that kind of mindset going into that service, you help a lot of people. And this is one of the things I think libertarians need to be better about. We don't want the government to help people. Well, then who's going to do it? We're going to do it. We have to do it. If we don't want regulators in DC or in our state house to do it, if we don't want bureaucrats to handle it, guess who has to handle it? You, me, and everybody else. And if it's important enough, I think it's worth us doing, right? That's why I'm a libertarian. And
I would just get frustrated. That's one of the big things is conservatives, regardless of how you feel about supporting Ukraine or not, conservatives say this shit where they're like, why are we spending $200 billion in Ukraine when we could be spending $200 billion here? And ignoring that a lot of that is aid or whatever else. It's like, okay, well, what were we doing before we were spending $200 billion in aid? Why are you motherfuckers acting like if we stop spending money in Ukraine, you're going to fucking spend it on the U.S. people? You never want to do this. This is not true.
Right.
It's not like one or the other. You would never, ever agree to this.
Yeah. And meanwhile, I'm like, yeah, why are we spending money overseas and here at home? Let's give the money back to people and let them organize independently. That's a much more ideologically consistent way of saying things than, if we had that money, we could spend it here at home. Okay, well, as a libertarian, what government functions would you want them to spend at home? Well, I don't want them to do anything. Then stop using that line of argument because it's a false line of argument. It's a better line of argument if you're a libertarian to say, I don't want us to be funding wars overseas or the wars here at home. I'd rather us not funding any of that shit. And at least you're being ideologically consistent when you do that. I agree. People who do that, especially, and I've seen libertarians saying that, who I'm as anti-war as I don't want to support money in Ukraine. But when they use that excuse, well, we could be bringing that money back home. It's like, okay, well, what federal program would you want that money to be used for? And when you say, I don't want any of them, well, your argument's now invalid then. Find another way to make the argument that wasting money overseas is a bad thing other than saying, well, we could be wasting it here at home.
That could be Elon's tax rebate that we're spending over there. That could be, we could really put that money to good use. I mean, I truly believe in a lot of ways that also, though, that a lot of the issues that the things that we're talking about here, like immigration and stuff, I believe a lot of it's just used as a way to get us to not think about our infrastructure issues, to not think about our drinking water having lead in it, to not think of things that are actually things that would make people violent.
Instead of lead, we're worrying about fluoride right now.
Yeah, fluoride. Yeah.
Wait.
Fuck me.
No, for me, you're right. There are things that we can worry about and have to work on, but they don't need to be splashed across a 24-hour news cycle. We don't need to create outrage over it. In fact, the outrage we create prevents us from focusing on the very issues that we claim that we want to fix in this country.
Yeah.
One of the things that I said was Trump winning this election. I think people ask, what's the worst thing that could happen? I would say, I think one of the worst things that could happen is Trump winning the election because it validates and it dictates so much of what the future media environment is going to look like going forward in terms of saying this is what works with the American people. And obviously I'm a very democratic supporting person, but so take everything I say with a grain of salt, I guess. But if you support infrastructure for the United States, you want infrastructure reinvestment, well, what's more important? Is it to pass legislation that allocates a lot of money to infrastructure, or is it important to just say you'll do it and never actually do it?
Yeah.
Well, it seems like it's probably more important to sloganeer around it better because nobody actually gives a fuck that Biden passed any type of legislative bill. Nobody cares that Trump said he would do it in his first term and didn't. They just care that I guess like Trump had better slogans around it. So at the end of the day, and this is one of the reasons actually why I even fight Democrats and I guess libertarians and progressives and everybody else who are like, oh, we need to worry about like kitchen table issues. And it's like, no, you don't. I don't think Americans give a fuck about it. What they care about is what the TV tells them to care about at this particular point in time. Because on kitchen table issues, Donald Trump didn't help anybody that much. Like, and on deficit spending, Donald Trump didn't do fuck all for that. And on foreign wars, Donald Trump didn't do all for that. And for immigration, Donald Trump didn't do fucking anything. Like, none of these issues, but he messaged around it really well.
Sure, yeah.
So if you want to feel like the guy who's telling you the best jokes or does the best memes on X or whatever is the one you want to vote for, that's fine. But don't sit here and pretend that it's about fucking policy, because clearly that doesn't fucking matter at all, because the conservatives have none.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the fact that even with like the Baltimore Bridge collapsing and stuff like that, like the general messaging I was seeing was about the mayor, was about like, when it's like, well, or you know what? A great example is here in Georgia with, we just recently got rid of Obamacare, or, we recently moved over to a state health program. And from my understanding, all it's doing is rejecting money that my federal tax dollars paid for, to now just rejecting it for the sake of getting rid of Obamacare, and now having like a state tax system where everybody's insurance went up and their deductibles went up and everything else. And it's just like, why did you do this? Like, what, like it actually, it affected my, like, I'm actually uninsured right now just because of like the trying to get on a new plan and being, because my old one went up by so much. And it's just like, you see the old and the new. And by the way, when I say this, most people who work for a company who get health insurance through their office or something like that, you probably won't be as affected by this because you're getting it through a business. If you are part of the marketplace program and giving yourself health insurance and finding it yourself, you've probably seen it go up by 30%. Just because in Georgia, just because of this, for no other reason, I can't think of another precedent, and nobody can tell me another precedent other than, well, we had to get rid of Obamacare. And it's like, okay, well, we got rid of it, and now I don't have insurance, and I'm like waiting on your slow ass system to get like on a new, more expensive, less effective policy. And for what? What did we accomplish here? I don't know, but
I can also say there's other, conservatives certainly do that. And let me just go ahead and shit on both sides right now while I'm here as the guy who's neither conservative nor progressive. I think the left does a lot of this too, where like, why won't Democrats support a bill that allows people to buy health insurance across state lines just to create more competition? Like, does it hurt anybody who's already on like Medicare if the people who are in the private insurance system are allowed to compete more? Like, I don't think that's a bad thing. And I think that should be able to be passed like 100 votes in the Senate. Hey, you should be able to buy health insurance across state lines. Like, I don't think that should be crazy. That should be not controversial. But because it's introduced by Republicans, Democrats reflexively must oppose it for some reason. Yep. And it flips around the other side too. Democrats will propose something, Republicans will reflexively oppose it, even if it's something they agreed with in previous generations. Immigration being a big one. Reagan was the big amnesty guy. He was the one who, when he left, was like, you can come anywhere from anywhere and become an American. And that's great. That's what makes America great. He literally said that's what makes America great. And now, like, that whole thing has been flipped on its head because Democrats are pro-immigration. We must be anti-immigration. I really hate the back and forth because there's a lot of good policy that could be passed to lower the cost of healthcare or to increase coverage or to increase, all sorts of other ways to help people's lives. But it's just not being done because if one side introduces the idea, the other side must reflexively hate it. And it's this lack of nuance that bothers the crap out of me. Speaking as somebody who kind of sits on the outside and just kind of watches the Republicans and Democrats do what they do, and I'm like, you're all terrible. But I think much of that has to do with the fact that how reflexively, oh my God, a Republican came up with that idea, it must suck. Oh, a Democrat came up with that idea, it must suck. Well, truth is they all kind of suck all the time.
I'll stand my party here. I think that this is a much bigger, I think that there might have been an element of truth to that 15 or 20 years ago, but I think right now the conservatives have lost their fucking minds. I think that it was shown in the Biden administration that Democrats are willing to negotiate on things and they'll do it, and that's why Biden was able to pass so much legislation. But I think when you can look at polling stuff for, if you believe the election was legitimate. Yeah. I think in 2020, it was like 94% of Democrats trusted the results of the election. And I think in 2024, that number went from, it was like 94 to like 84, or 92 to 82. It dropped by 10 points. Republicans in the 2024 election, they said that they felt like it was trustworthy and good. That number was at like 95% or something, or 94%. For 2020, that number was at like 27%. It was like a full-on, like fucking 60, 70 point swing in terms of trust. And it's like, This is not okay. Or when it comes to things like support for the war in Iraq or for supports for strikes in Yemen or in Syria. Democrats are generally always against it, even when Obama wanted to do it. Republicans were massively against it when Obama wanted to do it. When Trump did it, when Trump bombed that airport in Syria, it was like, thank God our president is bombing Syria to save them from chemical weapons attacks. Regardless if you think the attack was good or bad, I think that conservatives have gotten so unbelievably partisan. That immigration bill that was going to pass, that was Lankford's, that was a Republican immigration bill that was started by a guy in the Senate, but the plug got pulled on it because Trump wanted to keep it open as an election issue. I think
I don't think it has to do with conservative or anything. It has to do with Trump. Trump has taken over the party.
Yeah.
He is the party.
Yeah.
And it's because they really don't have anybody that has ever been able to match him on in terms of bombastic charisma. It's why Jeb Bush lost so bad. He was supposed to be the guy. Remember we were going to get Bush versus Clinton 2.0. That was the thing everybody was worried about. Oh my God, these dynasties. And then Trump showed up, and Shane Gillis has a great bit about this where he's like, yeah, the first guy's like, I think taxes should be lower. The second person's like, we need to fix our immigration system. Trump is like, Rand Paul looks ugly, he's a dog. Yeah. And it's like, wait, we can say that? We can do that? And it's like, yeah, he plays by a completely different set of rules, and it has stunted the Republican Party. And I can say this as somebody who doesn't love the Republican Party. I started out in politics being an anti-Bush Democrat. I've never loved the Republican Party. But I can certainly say they've been a lot more principled in the past. Like you used to know exactly what the Republican Party was going to think. Now it's like, what does Trump think? Now I know what the Republican Party is going to think. And it used to be, no, these are the principles they live by. This is where they're going to stand, whether you like it or not. Yeah. And I think there's a potential for that to happen to Democrats one day too. It hasn't happened to them, but you're right. Right now, the Republicans are under a spell of cult of personality. It very much could happen. If The Rock ran as a Democrat, you best believe the Democratic Party would fall all over themselves to start fawning over whatever The Rock believes.
I don't think so.
I do.
I
legitimately think celebrity is that powerful of a thing in this country.
Democrats fall over themselves to kick each other out constantly. I think one thing.
Say that about libertarians too.
Yeah, but if you look at, for example, at least Republicans could all get behind a single cult of personality. I think it's really toxic and unhealthy. But Democrats are constantly chasing away some of our best and brightest all the time with purity testing. We're so schismed that we just won't be able to unify under certain banners. I don't know if the popular side is Democrat right now, if The Rock came in, if enough people found out that he had said some unsavory things or something, I just don't see the meat there in the Democrat Party to allow a cult of personality in the way that Trump has done with Republicans. And I don't know why. I don't know what occurred within the Republican constituency. I have some suspicions that made them so much more ripe to be grabbed by a cult of personality, because I don't think Republicans have just forever and always been principleless. But I think Democrats would actually be able to fully resist right now a pretty major cult of personality. I think if we were going to have a cult of personality,
we forgave a lot of stuff Obama did for his cult of personality. There were a lot of things that Obama did that traditional Democrats and leftists would be hating if a Republican had done it, but they excused it because Obama did it. They were like, we get it. There are certainly situations where Obama's charisma pushed him over the edge, and now
sure.
I think actually his legacy is kind of less than what it was in 2014. People are like, Obama's going to go down as one of the greatest presidents of all time. He will never ever not be completely beloved by this country. And now people are like, he did some good things and he did some shitty things. They have mold on him because he's gotten away from it. I think that's going to happen with Trump too. I think Republicans in 10 years are going to be like, why were we? What? Why did we support that? That was stupid.
I feel like since 2014, everybody who isn't a Trump supporter has been waiting for the gotcha. Eventually he's going to do something, and he's done all those things, and the gotcha never happened. And in 2020, I did a lot of work with Adler Planetarium in Chicago, and obviously they couldn't have people in during COVID, and so they're switching to online stuff. And I had a stream with Mark Saburo. He's an astrophysicist and astronomer, and easily the most brilliant person I know. And before the stream, somebody from the Adler said, hey, do you have moderators in the chat? Do you have anything like that? And I was like, no, it's usually fine. And they're like, no, flat earth people sometimes come in, and they anything they see with astronomers, they just want to be, And I was like, oh, geez, okay. And then before the stream started, I asked them, I'm like, what like, is this a problem? He's like, yeah, they come in every now and then. It's just a thing. And I was like, do you just like want to like gouge your own eyes out from this? Is this the worst thing? And he was like, well, you're not arguing over whether the earth is flat or round. You're arguing with their identity. They go to clubs, and it's their online friends, and they watch that's the content they watch on social media, and it's literally just their entire identity is built up from that. And I'm not interested in talking somebody out of their identity over something like that. And that made me like think about everything going on with Trump and COVID and everything else. And I was like, this is actually really crazy. Like there isn't going to, like if Trump just started eating a baby, like a lot of people would say, well, he was hungry. There'd be some sort of like weird mental gymnastics to make that okay, because the other option of that is leaving the last 10 years of your identity, which is actually it's almost like a psychotic break. Like when somebody realizes that they have schizophrenia and everything they think isn't real.
But you've taken like so many steps in that direction. It feels like he can get more and more crazy.
Yeah.
Like again, we say this and we joke about it, and it's all like epic and hilarious, but like the threatening to use the military against our allies that's like an unhinged, crazy thing. Remember how angry Republicans were when they heard I think they heard Obama say something along the lines of like, I'll have more flexibility to negotiate after the election. Mm-hmm. Or supposedly they heard Biden say like, we're going to start World War III or whatever. And like, oh my God, this is the worst thing ever. But then when Donald Trump talks about like, well, maybe I'm not going to take the military off the table for Greenland and Mexico. It's like, bro, that's unhinged. And like, that's actually epic. That's fucking hilarious.
But and that happens when you silo thinking is a problem. It's one of the things where I try to tell people the Libertarian Party should not be a social club. The Libertarian, like as a Libertarian, I don't want the Libertarian Party to be the only thing you do, the only thing you pay attention to, the only podcast you listen to, because you're going to silo yourself, and that's going to separate you from like the other 99% of society. Like I'm a Libertarian, born, like through and through. But when you ask me what media do I watch, no, I'm not watching Libertarian podcasts all day. I'm not watching, I'm not reading only Libertarian books all the time, because if I did, I'd be boring. I'd only be interesting to other Libertarians, and I have a hard time finding friends because most people aren't. But Democrats do the same thing too. They silo think too. Like how many Democrats made effing excuses for Joe Biden? He's sharp as a tack. That guy, he's better than he was even in 2012. He's even sharper than he was as vice president. Can you believe it?
Yeah.
Absolutely, I cannot believe it because I've seen the man talk.
Absolutely, I completely disagree.
But they did
I think that when Biden had the difference between I think that Biden perfectly shows the difference between the Democrats and the Republicans. I think that there were people around Biden who talked to him enough and saw him enough day to day. I think that they genuinely believe that he'll probably be okay. And maybe they hyped it up a little bit, but if you look at the actions of the Democratic Party, if they really thought that Biden was as bad as he was, they would have never let him do that debate. And as soon as he did that debate,
that's why they let him do that debate, because the people who knew he was bad and could not talk him out of it forced him to put in the earliest presidential debate that's ever happened, because they knew he would bomb out and have to flame out, and they knew that was the last option to get him off the ballot.
Well, sure, but then, I mean, if that is the case, then at least, like you saw, there was a lot of division in the Democratic Party, and there was a huge backlash in the Democratic media.
Only once that debate happened, though. But for the entire
previous 3 years... Because that's when you saw, like, very clearly, like, okay, fuck, this is not good.
Yeah, but the previous 3 years, they all said he's fine. Like, Joe Scarborough even was like, oh, yeah, we met with him last week, and he was just great.
Sure, but I mean, like, that movement, that would never happen on the Republican side. That's impossible. Trump has given answers that are so much worse than anything I've ever heard Biden say in terms of senility, and he gets a pass on literally every single thing.
Right, every Republican still makes that excuse for him, and every Democrat calls him out on it. It's the exact same way flipped around.
But the difference is that the Republican media will never turn on Trump.
Yeah, the Democrat media only did it when they knew he was going to lose. They did it until they knew he was not a horse worth backing. And then they immediately, all of them, every member of the liberal media who crapped all over Kamala Harris, she's not ready for prime time, she couldn't even make it to Iowa, then all of a sudden, and she'd been disappeared for 3 years as vice president, all of a sudden, like, here's our great hope, she's fantastic. And I get trying to make the horse you're riding look the best that you can, even if it's not the horse you picked, which is what happened with Kamala Harris. But like,
even if I grant you all of that, which I wouldn't, but even if I were to grant all of that, Trump lost in 2020 to Biden, and they ran the exact same candidate. And they did, and 2022 was not good for Republicans in terms of where they thought they would be. All of the special elections for these Trump-backed candidates, he was not panning out. He was a loser electorally, which is supposed to be like the only thing that a party will really hate you for, is if you're losing elections. That's like the worst thing. Trump lost in 2020. The elections were not good in 2022. The special elections leading up to it were not good. We've got like 2 blue senators, right, like in fucking Georgia. And they ran him again in 2024. Now they won, but it's like he is impervious to criticism. And you've got J.D. Vance as his vice president who said, I'm not sure if Trump might be America's next Hitler. You've got Elon Musk who called him a sore loser. You've got like all these people around him who have all bent the knee in ways that I don't think it would ever happen on the Democratic
Kamala
side.
Harris called Joe Biden a racist on a debate stage and still ended up as his running mate.
Yeah, but she called him a racist in that, like, because he opposed busing policies and like the
that little girl was me, Joe. That little girl was me.
Yeah, and it was a good debate line.
T-shirt about it,
was
and
a
she
good
still
debate
became his
line.
running mate.
Donald Trump almost had his last vice president killed.
I know.
It's not even remotely close.
I mean,
Like Vance, one of the reasons why Vance was allowed to run with Trump is because Vance said, if Donald Trump tries to coup the government again, I'm going to help this time. Like it's not the same. I think it's totally different worlds.
I think the problem that happens a lot when we're like doing these like counting of both sides is that we're like, well, this thing happened here, and you're like, yeah, well, this thing happened here, and because we have like an equal tally on both sides, we're like, see, it's similar. But the problem is that like, are they of the same severity, right? Like that's the actual question, because it's possible that maybe the Republicans have only done like one major thing on this list, but if it's bigger than the sum total of everything on this side, then there is still a disparity. And I think it's reasonable to say, like, I have a lot of criticisms of the Democratic Party, and I'm a lot more critical of them than Stephen. But I think acting like the cult of personality in the Republican Party is the same as the partisanship that's kind of standard in both parties just all the time, I think is equivocating something that isn't equivocal, right? I would agree Democrats are partisan. I would say, for example, I saw so many like Democrats being like, yeah, fuck the squirrel, like Fred the squirrel and stuff, the peanut and whatnot. And there's a bunch of Democrats that were like defending that because Republicans had decided to make it a blue thing and attack it. And it was like, we don't need to defend this. It's just sad that a squirrel got killed for no reason.
Until they found out the squirrel's dad was an OnlyFans model, and then every conservative forgot talking about Peanut. That's exactly what happened, by the way. If you notice that story just dropped off, and it's because all of a sudden conservative media looked into the owner of the squirrel, and they're like, oh, he's got an OnlyFans named Squirrel Daddy. We're going to stop caring about him now.
Yes.
Which did happen. But I see your point.
Yeah.
I don't think that what we're seeing from either side is standard partisanship, certainly not from the Republicans. And I do think Trump is a unique thing. Like, Trump is unique. It's not like there won't ever be the possibility of a Trump on the Democratic side. And I think we are still, with the excuses that were made for Biden and the, those kinds of things, it primes it for one day a Trump to exist in the Democratic Party. It's just a matter of when, not if. It's when it's going to happen, in my opinion. That's what I think, and this is just me as an outside observer of the two-party system, of just seeing how I hate both of them. Like, I'm not really a fan of either of their leadership, and I just see the possibility. And libertarians are the same way. We get into this silo where we only think we're right, anybody else is wrong, and like, if they don't have any libertarian leanings, then everything they must think is completely ridiculous. And I think that is wrong thinking, particularly for an alternative party. It's not any way for the Libertarian Party to grow, I'll tell you that. We will stay stuck at 1% to 3% if we only view the most pure libertarians as being worthy of listening to. But, I think Democrats, Republicans, libertarians, all of us make excuses for our own bullshit. And the more we do it, the more it stinks and the more people start to see it, which is why, and I don't, Trump winning, he beat Biden. He lost to Biden, but he beat Hillary Clinton. And I think if the Democrats had run anybody but Joe Biden in 2020, Trump might not have won the primary. I think if 2 years ago, if 2022, if Joe Biden had said, I'm not running, we're going to have an open primary to see the next leader of the Democratic Party, and we're going to move ourselves forward, I guarantee you it would have been a lot easier for DeSantis to pick up steam in that Republican primary, or Nikki Haley to say, the Democrats are moving on. They're moving on. They're not staying stuck to their old people. We need to move on too. And it would have been a much easier thing. But because Democrats stuck in that Biden train, it was a lot easier for Biden.
I mean,
Trump.
You're not going to, why would you throw away your incumbent when you know the same guy that, who lost
because
to is probably going to run again?
Physically and mentally is not doing well. Because when you look at him, you
neither
go,
is
can
Trump.
this guy drive
Trump is
a
an
car?
insane person. We just have no standards for him.
But say what you want. And they're both old, they're both feeble, and they're both pretty senile, I'll be honest. But Trump at least does it in an entertaining way.
He doesn't anymore, though. If you go back and you watch, if you watch Trump, because even I fell into this. I was like, oh, at least Trump is funny. Trump is not funny anymore.
Yeah.
And he also, and this is actually something I think Trump could have done.
Meatball Ron.
That's why people leave the
But Meatball Ron
things
is a
now.
Yeah, I guess that's a
2024?
year old now. Yeah.
Meatball Ron's
I
old.
feel like a year old counts as
I feel like
modern
Meatball
day
Ron
Trump.
was the last time I laughed at Trump.
Yeah, and
You
maybe
can't make
with
the line
Trump.
of old
Yeah.
Trump like 2024 and before.
no. Yeah, I think
No,
that,
going to the McDonald's was funny. That was objectively
Yeah.
hilarious.
McDonald's-
That
Yeah,
was
but that was like in a laugh at, not laugh
Yeah,
with.
yeah.
Yes, that was
laughing with-
objectively
yeah.
hilarious.
But
It-
and Trump's team made a lot of really good PR choices that Kamala's team did not make this year. Like the Aiden Ross stream was a really, really good idea. There's just a number of PR choices that the Trump team did and were able to do with Trump that I don't think Democrats did or were able to do with him.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah,
but it's kind of like making PR choices where you're like the favorite sibling and you're competing with another sibling. Like, I feel like it's hard for Trump to misstep because his side will not hold him accountable for literally fucking anything.
yeah.
He
Aiden
can
Ross
say-
can't fucking read. What are we talking about?
sure.
Like
But, I
that
mean,
guy.
like-
That guy. Like that's the one I'm talking about, right? The one who gave him the Tesla, the car, that
Yeah,
one. Yeah,
I
that guy
tried
can't.
to.
That guy can't read. Why is that guy being used for political discourse? Now, I'll say this: he was smart to go on a lot of not that one, but I think a lot of the other podcasts, like Theo Vaughn, very smart for him to go on.
Yeah.
Why? Because Theo Vaughn is the everyman. I just saw that guy do a podcast with Timothée Chalamet, and it was awesome. It was really good. Why? Because that's the type of person who can talk to anybody and create a conversation with anybody, even Donald Trump, and make it entertaining. They were smart. You're right. They had and Kamala Harris. I don't think she had that. Like, I just don't think she had that same charisma level,
She didn't, but I think also when you
and it hurt her.
Yeah, but the people that were advising, like Anita Dunn was one of her main PR advisors. And the reality is, like, Anita Dunn is like a mainstream media dino. She's really like, and this isn't a takeaway from Anita Dunn, she's incredibly, her legacy is incredible. The issue is that she doesn't really understand new forms of media at all. She's very nervous of it. And so I think she gave her and the team around Kamala gave Kamala a lot of advice against alternative media and stuff like that. And I think it hurt her campaign a lot. But if you watch Kamala, she definitely struggles a little bit more with contentious conversations. But I don't want to be like, she's just not charismatic. It's like, she's just a decently likable person. Like, there's nothing overly awful about Kamala.
I mean,
Everyone's
to
saying,
me, she seems like if someone, if like earlier I said Snoop Dogg is like America's grandpa now, like, or America's uncle. She's like America's kooky aunt. She's like, to me, she fits in the same personality as like, and she just retired as Hoda, right? Drinks some red white wine, has a good time, likes to enjoy herself, but she doesn't seem like a policy heavyweight. And that was
As
and
opposed to Trump, who's...
I don't. But see, you just said that they don't care about policy over the
I
Republican
know.
side.
But that's the hard thing, is to balance out like the different concerns. Like, what did you guys both watch Trump on Rogan?
I watched part of it.
No,
The first 40 minutes, Rogan was trying to ask him, what is it actually like to step into the White House and be president?
Yeah.
And you could tell, it was very, not you could tell, like, he basically was explicitly saying it, like let's say you want to do something, you pick up the phone and you call like the housing and urban
Right.
development, like what's it like? And Trump's like, the bed, there's such a big bed, and Abraham Lincoln slept there, and the lawn, and Trump was just not understanding it. And I think like the first half hour was Rogan trying to reiterate this question like 3 or 4 times, and Trump just was not understanding what he was saying. But it's okay because like nobody cares. And Trump can have like infinite amounts of missteps like this. Kamala Harris goes on to fucking CNN. I remember that the table interview with Kamala and Tim Walz. This was like, the questions were, it's a hard question, and then a hard follow-up, and then a hard follow-up to a poll. It's like, holy fuck. Meanwhile, Donald Trump does his first interview back with, I wish I could remember I should remember this media station. But like, it was the first one they did after winning the election. And even at the end of this, he was calling the lady nasty, and it was the most softball interview ever. And Trump was lying about everything, and not getting like held to account for anything. Like, what the fuck?
it's hard to piece this together by design, but like this is probably how you're familiar with my content to begin with. Like in Russia, Vladislav Surkov, if you're familiar with that person, he was Putin's right-hand person and strategist, and he worked in a lot of theater, and he came up with the great idea to fund pretty much every political movement in Russia, and then let them all know that Putin's funding all of them. And it ended up just making truth and objectivity malleable and exhausting and difficult to deal with. And I mean, it's absolutely incredible how it worked and how it kept Putin in power. But I'm not even saying anything about like Russia's connection to Trump or anything like that. But when you look at the initial primaries for Trump, he literally says on stage repeatedly that he's donated money to every single campaign of every person on the debate stage, and he's a shapeshifter. He doesn't make sense. And so when we say like who had the better campaign, it's almost kind of a nonsense question, because one of them wasn't a campaign. Like Trump's campaign, it's not so much a political campaign as it's just a lot of not being able to make sense of anything other than your feelings that you have at that moment. You're frustrated, and he will be whatever you need him to be, even if he said something different yesterday. And the people pointing out that he said something different are annoying, and they're trying to stop you from feeling the way you want to feel. And that's what drives the whole thing. And so being like, Kamala, Biden, who would have won? I don't think it's even that. I don't think that's a conversation to have. I think it's more like we really need to actually look at objectivity itself, because we've lost it in the post-truth
I don't think either of
era.
them would have won. And I know you said that wasn't important, but here's why they wouldn't have won: because they were going to try to run a traditional race. They were going to try to run a traditional campaign against a very non-traditional candidate.
Yeah, I agree with that, but then I think we have to be careful, because a lot of people want to have like traditional analysis, and I agree. Like, I think you have like this, you have like this beautiful, super fast and powerful, this red Lamborghini or whatever, and it's got all whatever features and sets. And then on the other hand, you've got like this like really shitty rundown like red Honda Civic. And you're trying to get your friend to like take a car, and like, which one do you want? They're free or whatever.
Yeah.
And they're like, I really think I want the Honda Civic. And you're like, we got to make the Lamborghini faster. We give it better brakes. We change the transmission. We drop in a whole new whatever. We're doing all these things. And then at the end of the day, your friend is always with the Honda Civic. And then eventually you find out at the very end, they're like, oh, I like the Honda Civic because it's red or whatever. I like the Honda Civic because of this color as well.
Yeah.
And I just wanted a black car. And I was like, okay, what the fuck? But then at the end, people are always like, well, the Lamborghini's cornering wasn't as tight as we would have wanted it to be. And we think that maybe having like, and it's like, yeah.
The Honda Civic has better gas mileage. It'll last longer. It'll last 250,000 miles.
I guess, what if there's two people selling the cars, and the whole reason that people like the Honda Civic is because they really like the Honda Civic salesman?
But the issue is that Honda Civic salesman in the U.S. example is actually a whole conglomeration of the way that media and our political system come together to operate in conjunction with like the way that we consume media today too. Like things like like you said it. I don't want to spoil your top secret stuff, so I won't go into it, but you talked about how you like keep your videos interesting and stuff, right?
Sure.
That's a product of where we live. If you had a show on TV, you wouldn't even approach your content like that.
Oh no, I disagree with that. Think about most documentary or reality series stuff. You see it; they like show you what's coming next, and then when you start, they show you what just happened and what's coming next, and then play what's happening.
Sure, but I'm thinking in an environment where you're not competing with people on their fucking cell phones.
Yeah.
Like,
Sure.
You're still going to try to make it somewhat compelling. One of the most interesting things I ever heard in my life was an early guy that worked at Cartoon Network with Adult Swim. You familiar? Yeah. He talked about how toxic the environment was, where consumers could choose every single thing they wanted to watch, because he said one of the most difficult things, one of the coolest opportunities that they had at Adult Swim was after popular shows or whatever blocks, they could stick a really fucking weird cartoon there. And because people already watched the last thing, a decent chunk of them will stick around and watch it, and they can see like, will this work or not? You cannot do that in today's environment, because you can see on every YouTube video you upload exactly when people click on the video, and YouTube knows, and TikTok knows, and everybody knows. And so like, if you have something that's like, oh, this is weird, and they click off, nope, we're not going to serve that. We want to watch another episode of The Office, or we want to see another like very quick, passionate, emotional 20-second outburst, and that is getting so much more engagement than sitting here and watching something that's not as hyper entertaining and keeping your eyes locked on the screen. And that's an issue, and I think that plays into our political environment.
So the question is why can't Democrats just find a hyper interesting person that supports the same policies they do?
You can, but you just have to keep in mind then that because the Democrats are trying to win on different fronts, and I would argue that it's the only reason why the country is still functional is because Democrats think that governing the country is actually important. They could abandon that concept of governing. Like if I was like a Democratic strategist and I was trying to like run on fucking kitchen table issues or tabletop issues, I'd be like, this is fucking retarded. Why? Like, fuck Americans, like wages and prices of anything. Apparently this doesn't matter anymore. We just need to have like the best slogans. But if the Democrats sort of give up on governance, we just lose our government. Because every single time anything is working, it's usually because the Democrats have agreed to try to come to the middle. Like, okay, well, we'll work with Republicans here. We'll come together and we'll do this here. And then when the Republicans have the reins, it's a fucking shit show disaster. And all of my lifetime, and in the majority of the lifetimes of everybody here, it's been Democrats who are the spending crazy people, right? It's Bill Clinton that had the budget surplus. Then we had Bush, and then our trillions of dollars of commitments to the Middle East. And then we had the 2007, 2008 financial collapse that impacted the whole world. We had to bring in Obama, a Democrat, to clean it up. And then we got Trump again after Obama cleaned everything up to do deficit spending under a huge economy and to mismanage and fuck COVID up so much and fuck everything up in the country. Then we had to bring in Obama, okay, and then the Democrats fixed everything, and now the economy's like back running again, but now inflation. Now we're gonna bring in Trump in again. And it's like, what the fuck? Like, can I have a Democrat come in where there's not a global crisis happening, and then we can see like what it looks like when they try to govern from like an even playing field? Holy shit!
I think, well, an interesting tidbit in that is that one of the things that Bush Jr. did in his first term, like the place where he spent a lot of the surplus on the war, but he also spent a lot of the surplus on subsidizing prescription drugs. It was, at the time, it was like the largest universal healthcare, the largest government healthcare program ever. And it's kind of funny how like that has been so lost just from like, the partisan lines, like that he actually, like he won that election.
Education policy too, with No Child Left Behind. He did a big government, huge authoritarian, centralized education policy that all these education freedom people voted for.
He ran, his platform that he ran on and how he won was telling elderly people that if you are above retirement age, your prescriptions are free. Like that's.
It's also insane watching Bush talk, and this was the dumb guy. This was the idiot.
Yeah.
And comparing him talking about like literally any topic, and then to Trump, it's like, oh my God, Bush sounds like he graduated from fucking Yale.
Not to be one, but also to Biden too. Bush is far more coherent than Joe Biden is.
Oh, for sure.
He is, for sure. But at least Biden, when Biden is talking, he's trying to talk about like policy and like real things that are happening.
I mean, in my opinion, George Bush Jr. was more coherent than Gore. Like and to this day, I think like if I were to take any presidential candidate when they were in their debate and pick one to like hang out with, to like, whatever, I go hiking with or have a beer with, George Bush Jr. would probably be that. He seems like the most likable.
Ironically, weird enough, George W. Bush won that contest. Who would you most likely have a beer with compared to him and Gore, and compared to him and Kerry? And George Bush doesn't drink anymore. He's an ex-drinker. He doesn't drink beer.
Yeah.
Same thing. Trump had the same thing. Who would you rather have a beer with, Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump? Donald Trump won that poll.
Yeah.
Why? Because nobody wants to have a beer with Hillary Clinton, but also Donald Trump doesn't drink either. And that's another thing is that all of the craziness that he's had has been completely stone cold effing sober, unless you count Sudafed or whatever else he's taken. But like, but it's certainly not booze related because he doesn't drink any of it, which just goes to say that maybe drinking isn't a bad thing. But what I'm trying to say is that, ultimately it's about the bombasti of Trump. It's just, that's what people have been drawn to. He had that I want to have a beer with him quality for some reason. And I still think and Biden, I think, beat Trump on that in 2020. People would rather have had a beer with Joe Biden. I don't know about Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, who they'd rather have a beer with. I'd rather have a beer with neither of them. But like,
the Biden
those
thing
vibes, man. Like the vibes sometimes win. It's really
But the question is,
sometimes. You're right. Maybe the policy doesn't matter as much as the vibes do sometimes.
It's almost like memes made Biden likable. Like it's almost, I can't even point to anything.
The ice cream stuff.
Other than like, would you shut up, man? Other than that line, I can't think of anything that he said to give him that like dark Biden or the dark Joe sort of, the ice cream sunglass. Like, was
his I want to have a beer with him was mostly like, oh, he's folksy, he's from Scranton, he's working class. It's like, he's not really any of those things, but that's how they sell it to you. But, and that's why people wanted to have a beer with him more in 2020. Now in 2024 again, I think the whole who you want to have a beer with thing went out the effing window. I think COVID kind of screwed that up. I think COVID also made a lot of this country really hyper-partisan and even more entrenched than it was. And I think we're still coming out of that. So I don't know. 2025 is going to be a crazy year. It's going to be, and not just because Trump's president, we have a Republican Congress, that we're going to get plenty, I'm sure, out of our government. But I don't know. I am a glass half full. I'm an optimist. I think the world will get better. And maybe I'm the crazy one for thinking that.
I had a question. Who do you guys think is the Democrat equivalent to Marjorie Taylor Greene?
Ooh.
Because I feel like the closest we had was
Yeah,
Jamal Bowman, but he got voted out, right?
Yeah,
'Cause he was too
Bowman,
extreme.
I would say in terms of the way they aggravate the other side, I'm not necessarily comparing the two equivocally, but I would say Elon Omar pisses off the right as much as Marjorie Taylor Greene pisses off the left, because she's a woman of color who is a child of or he's immigrated from somewhere else. Like, it pisses
Think about
off
what you just said, though, the comparison. That's why they trigger her. Marjorie Taylor Greene
I think also
fucking QAnoner.
No, I think it's also I think it's also because the way Elon Omar says things can really piss off a lot of people. In particular, I know a lot of Jewish Democrats who really find her to be absolutely, beyond the pale because of the way she talks about things. Of course, I am a huge skeptic and a huge critic of Israel and the things they're doing, but maybe it's the way she packages it that pisses them off. I would say she's in my mind, if you said who's the Democratic Marjorie Taylor Greene that just like is nails in a chalkboard to the other side, probably her, and it's no fault of hers. I mean, she's a Democrat. She's going to vote as Democrats do. And frankly, like, I've only gotten one interaction with Marjorie Taylor Greene, and she was complaining about the fact that the Atlanta Press Club debate was not being held in her district. And in my mind, I wanted to say, it's the Atlanta Press Club. You have to come here, and they're giving you a free debate to air. Why are you complaining about having to drive 3 hours from wherever you're at? Like,
right, but I think that's kind of the issue. Is like it feels like if anyone's on both sides are here between the two of us, it's probably going to be more me. Like I think I'm a lot more center, but there's something wrong to compare somebody who says the Democrats sent the hurricanes, don't trust FEMA, and is just, it sounds like some slightly disagreeable to somebody who packages some things wrong, and to be like, these are the same things. Where it's like, even Democrats oftentimes are holding Democratic politicians to way different standards than we ever are willing to hold a Republican to a certain standard. Like, it's insane to me. There is no Marjorie Taylor Greene of the left. There isn't, because the closest we had was Jamal Bowman with the fire extinguisher thing, and he lost his riding because he was so disconnected from his people, and people thought he was annoying, right? Whereas I don't know when she'll lose her seat, but she's insane. She's an insane person, and she spreads not just mild conspiracies. Like,
if you give me time to research, I can find very stupid things that Democrats have said. Like off the top of my head, Hank Johnson once said that Guam would tip over if we moved all of our people to one side of the island, that they would tip over on itself, because I guess he thinks an island just floats in the sea, right? Like it's like an ice cube just floating. There have been plenty of stupid things, but what I see right now from the Republican Party is, because they lack the principle, because like their platform is just this weird amorphous kind of conservatish thing, they don't have like a strict platform to go on. It's much easier to be caught by that cult of personality, including the Marjorie Taylor Greene. She's the same symptoms. She's bombastic, she gets attention, and she's in a deep red area. The reason why she will always be there is not because she's protected, it's because her district is protected. If she had tried to run originally where she was from, where I am, Lucy McBath's district, she wouldn't have won. That's where she was originally trying to run, but only after somebody else left that 14th district did she move herself up there, because she had a business up there, because she realized, I'll win. And so I think that one of the big problems is the fact that we gerrymander the shit out of our country. The fact that there are so many safe red and safe blue districts that it allows for the Jamal Bowmans to come out on the blue side. It allows for Marjorie Taylor Greene.
He got booted by a Democrat.
He did, eventually. Yes.
But Marjorie Taylor Greene is not getting booted by a more sane Republican.
I think
that's my concern.
I think you have to drive through her district to understand why she will always be. Like, it's just.
I've been there, and and I can say no. I can say there is a chance that happens one day, but you're right. There's less a chance that she'll ever have a serious primary.
And I think there's also the difference too, when you bring up like the Guam guy, like all the Democrats would look at that and laugh. Nobody's going to be like, well, maybe Guam could tip over. Or if you look at like Ilhan Omar, like these are not popular Democratic lawmakers. Mm-hmm. Marjorie Taylor Greene represents like the soul of the Republican Party right now. Like Marjorie Taylor Greene is like probably. Am I making this up, or was she one of the most effective? Was she the most effective fundraiser on the Republican side?
I don't believe. I hope she wasn't, because her race doesn't require anything for her to win.
Sure, not but for her, but for like the Republican Party.
I mean, I'm sure
she's. But like she's a huge name. Like everybody loves Marjorie Taylor Greene, and she represents like MAGA, which is like the main.
Can we just clip that part out?
Everybody loves
Marjorie Taylor Greene
in the Republican Party.
It's a good sitcom. Yeah.
Including us.
Yeah.
But I see what you're saying.
Bobart.
Like I do, and like. I think ultimately this is why I do believe a lot of libertarian-ish people who have been voting Republican for a while are probably due to maybe ditch the party. And I welcome them to become sane libertarians and not have to be forced into an insane Republican Party. Like, if you legitimately care about debts and deficits, if you legitimately care about the role of government, why are you even in the Republican Party these days? And certainly the Democratic Party is probably not for you either, because of the spending and other things. Join the Libertarian Party. Help us grow.
So I'm pretty outspoken in general, just about everything on my platform, and I often, if somebody asks me where I am on the political compass, just from looking at issues and how I decide on most of them, I'm usually somewhere in like egalitarian, libertarian principles. I think maybe it would be fun for me to like find areas where or I guess just ask you questions about like something where I might be a little bit wishy-washy about. So gun control is a big one. How do you feel about magazine limits?
I mean, I'm an absolutionist. I don't think there needs to be limits. Like, honestly, my thing is if you shoot somebody and you're committing an offensive crime, that deserves punishment. Owning a gun, just owning it, shouldn't really harm.
But I mean, what if it's like, because obviously you could get into the like, well, what about a nuclear weapon?
And no,
What
but
about
see, that gets
tanks?
asked me all the time, and I'm actually I'll be consistent here. I don't believe that individual citizens should own nuclear weapons. I also don't believe the government should own nuclear weapons either. I'm a full nuclear non-proliferation guy.
Yeah.
I think it's the worst weapon that's ever been invented. It's created all sorts of problems, and of course, tens of thousands of people in Japan are still not here because of that. So like, I believe in the right to bear arms, but I do believe that nuclear is kind of that's my area where I'm not
Okay.
fully
Most soldiers
libertarian.
don't actually have extended mags just because it's wasteful and because they don't actually need to pump 100 bullets into something. They can, 10 is fine. You could even put 12 in a clip if you want to. I guess that's always been my biggest thing because I'm a gun owner. It was weird for me to find out this morning that I own more guns than the Libertarian candidate for president.
I only have a couple, so
Yeah, maybe we're even. But I was just like, I thought about that. I was like, do I own more guns than the Libertarian candidate? That's just because.
So you have to have all those guns though, because you have fucking 10-round magazines. So when one runs out, you have to pull your other one out.
They
So
only
there
come
you
with
go.
one
Oh my
mag.
gosh, so-
Yeah, you can't get another.
So my gun that I usually have on me is actually a 38 special. It's a police issue revolver. It has 6.
Right.
6 is the maximum amount I can load into that thing.
But like, I don't want. The thing is like, if somebody, let's just say, I don't have a gun for like personal protection here, but like for anybody watching, I live on a farm and farms generally have guns. If I were in bed and somebody broke in, my guns are. I mean, I wouldn't want more than a few shots just because what am I going to be shooting at if I can't hit a target? If my life's in danger or something, like, do I want that many? But really, here's why I have this. Here's why this is something that I struggle with, is because nearly every single mass shooting, when you look at the weapons that were used, there's extended mags used, and those extended mags would be a 5-second, even if the person's extremely trained, that would be a few seconds where they had to drop a man, come back in, and that's where somebody could tackle them. And it's like, that's just the one thing where it's like everybody could keep their ARs and everything else, but you just can't have more than 10 bullets at a time. You have to take a break from the shooting. And I cannot think of one, even in war, it doesn't make sense to be in a battlefield and just keep shooting, like, because you have other people, it's very strategic. But the only place it seems to make sense to need more than 10 bullets in a semi-automatic weapon is if you have a bunch of people trapped in a place who you're trying to kill them all. Like, I can't think of another place where like a trained person with weapons would.
So I think the issue is, so one, the burden would be on the government to say, why do you need to ban it? Not why. So it's not, I don't have to justify why I should have a thing. You have to tell me where you can take it from me. So I think from the first perspective. Second perspective is, depending on how deep you want to go into it, from like a self-defense perspective, more rounds are generally better than less rounds for two big reasons. One is because in a self-defense situation you might miss, which is scary. And two is because oftentimes you need to shoot somebody a lot for them to go down. You shoot somebody like once or twice, unless you get like really lucky shots, they're not going to go down. And so if there's like 2 attackers, like having 6 shots in a 38 Smith & Wesson special, that's going to be scary in my opinion. That's like every shot needs to fucking count there, or else you're going to be trying to fucking reload, in between, I guess, attackers. In terms of mass shootings, are these guys all really using, when you say extended mags, are you just referring to like a standard 30-round AR-15 mag, or are you talking like 60-round or like...
Yeah, the standard mag is 10 to 12.
Standard mag AR-15 is 30 rounds, okay. The standard 10 is like...
For an AR-15?
Yeah.
That's not an extended?
No, that's an ordinary mag, yeah.
Okay.
Because the California will cap them at 10.
I have a high point AR clone, so mine's 10.
It's 10, okay. That's like a California safe, I'm guessing.
Yep.
Because an ordinary magazine, if it's yay big...
Yeah, it's like that.
Oh yeah, is it shooting 5.56? Like the ordinary...
Mine shoots 9mm because it's cheaper. I'm a cheap gun owner.
Oh,
I like ammo that I can afford.
Okay, I'm assuming it's like a double stack magazine. It's like the bullets going like this and they go like that. If it's this big, like for 10 rounds of 9mm, you can probably hold that like in this space.
Okay.
So if it's that big, usually they put an artificial limiter in there so that it doesn't actually go deep enough. So okay, I was just trying to know what you meant when you said.
Okay, well, if I was gun
magazine.
king, I would say, like, if you can't hit something in 10 shots, you probably should spend that money on lessons.
More shooting.
Yeah, but then there's the saying that I heard this from a guy who is rural guy. He's a guy in Alabama. He's black and lived in rural America, and he said, you know why I need more than 12 shots? In case there's more than 12 Klansmen in my front yard.
Yeah.
Because if a gang comes to attack my family because I live in the rural middle of nowhere, I have to be able to defend them. And this is a much bigger issue, particularly for people who do live in the middle of nowhere. Like if your police response time is 14 minutes, because the nearest county police is like down the mountain and it takes a while for them to get there.
Sure.
As opposed to 3 minutes in a lot of major cities. If you're
But
lucky,
if I had,
lucky and you have really good police response.
If I had looters coming here from Atlanta, coming into, I still would be able to like take cover and reload and things like that. Like I would just buy a bunch of mags. Like I would just have boxes of magazines.
But you also never know. And like that's the thing is like and again, unless you're committing the offense, unless you're hurting people, there's nothing that's harming you from owning a gun that holds more than that. And so again, burden of proof. Why should we have to take that away from you if you're not harming anybody? If you've never ever demonstrated harming anyone ever with an offensive weapon, why should we take your ability away to fire 30 bullets, instead of 10 in a single magazine? I think, if you're not hurting anybody, that's fine. If you demonstrate violent tendencies, maybe the situation would be if you commit a mass shooting and you're using an extended magazine, there'll be an extended magazine charge. That would be much more in line with the Constitution than to say you can't have an extended magazine, because then you're infringing upon someone's Second Amendment rights. But when someone commits an offense and you say you did it using this kind of weapon, just as if if I punch you, that's assault. If I stab you, that's still assault, but it's assault with a deadly weapon. It's a different kind of charge. And so, 2A absolutionists are going to hate the fact that I just mentioned that would be a much more constitutional way to control that kind of a thing. Yeah. But that would be, because you would not be declaring somebody guilty before they've done something. You would be adding a charge that then has to be proven in a court of law that they did that, and they did that using that equipment. And so, that would be more constitutional. I'm not saying I want that, because I'm a 2A absolutionist. Please don't come at me, libertarians. But when I talk about that's kind of where I'm at with that.
And then maybe if you were charged with that extra thing, then that could even maybe go around the thing preventing someone from suing a gun company, like the laws that prevent you from suing gun companies for...
That's so crazy.
Yeah.
No, I think you're great. Why would you sue a gun company because somebody does a mass shooting?
Yep.
Let's say I've got the best Hummers are the best people killer truck, and I do a mass killing with a Hummer or something. Does somebody get to sue Hummer for making the vehicle?
Say if I run over you.
Well, I would argue with that. I would argue that Hummers are made for many purposes other than killing.
Yeah, I can target shoot. I can, I can shoot a balloon out of the sky. I can I can shoot some clay pigeons.
I think. I think that. I could think it's a little bit absurd. I could see the absurdity of an argument of suing a gun company for a mass shooting, but I think that the government telling you that you can't is what's goofy. Then let the court decide that.
That's probably true for everything, though, right?
It would just get tossed out as frivolous. It would just spend a lot of money, and people would get pissed off about it. So I think the idea of just saying, listen, you can't do that. It's the same reason why. Like you said, if somebody runs over somebody in a Ford, you can't sue Ford because they use the F-150 in an offensive manner to kill people, right?
There's, I guess, what if you were able to argue that it was marketing in a certain way?
Yeah, you can hunt varmints on your farm. You literally have a legitimate use for a gun that doesn't involve killing people.
But I guess
what if you could hunt? What if there was a commercial with a Chevy, and it's sometimes you got to drive through a lot of people.
Yeah, right.
Like a rock.
Well, because McDonald's got sued. McDonald's got sued for that, for marketing unhealthy food to children. And I'm not sure if they won or lost or settled, but going through that lawsuit, but I think that's actually what spawned the Super Size Me movie.
Sure.
I think he was just this ridiculous lawsuit that you heard about, and then he actually just, did the experiment where he ate McDonald's every day.
Yeah, I think there could be an argument for that if people, but come to think of it, now I'm curious, are gun advertisements illegal? Because I feel like I've never seen an ad.
You can see them in gun magazines, you don't see them on television.
Is it illegal to do it on TV, or?
You know what? I'd have to look that up. There might be a regulation, just like hard liquor. I
feel like I've never seen a Glock ad.
No, you used to not be able to. I mean, you can't market cigarettes on television. You can't say, light up with some Lucky Strikes, and you probably. I think it's before a certain hour of the day you can't advertise hard liquor like Absolute Vodka or something. So, I imagine there's probably some sort of FCC regulation that prevents that from happening. But there's Guns and Ammo magazine. I'm sure they advertise in those,
Yeah,
right?
of course.
Like,
The answer is there's no federal law that prohibits it, but many TV networks have banned gun ads.
okay, so it's hey, free
dig it,
market
yes.
wins again, baby.
All right.
Libertarianism.
I
We
love
didn't
that.
need the government to ban those things. The market did it itself. See, you don't need the government to do things all the time. I like that. I'm going to use that.
Well, no. So
All my Pro 2A friends are going to hate when I use that as an example of us.
Careful,
No-
get him on the net neutrality now.
what? Well, no. Like with the TikTok ban, which I think everybody in this room probably agrees is silly and shouldn't really.
I'm for them.
You're for the TikTok ban?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll get in that. But one thing that I do think though is like if there has been people decompiling the app and audit, like individuals who have decompiled and audited the app and found some pretty atrocious things, and also TikTok very intentionally obfuscates what's happening to the data inside the app. And so to me, it's like, okay, well, Google Play and Apple's App Store, these are pretty clear violations of both of their policies. So like if TikTok wasn't as big and as popular as they were, if I created a social media app that like had these security vulnerabilities or these privacy issues, they would remove me immediately. There'd be no questions asked. But if all of a sudden Apple said, okay, we're kicking you off because you're not listening to us, or they offered them some sort of proposal and they didn't do it, and then they kicked them off, you would have a lot of people then moving over to Android. And so there's this financial incentive to keep them on there. And so they're not actually policing themselves the way that they should, which creates this pretty difficult problem.
So here's what I'm going to tell you to do. And this is just for you to make money.
Yeah.
Make an app that has all those security breaches and everything that you were just mentioning, and let them throw you off, and then sue them and use TikTok as your reason why you should be allowed on there, and sue the shit out of Apple and Android.
Yeah,
And either force them to equally apply things or give you a lot of money because they hassled you. I mean, just for fun. I'm just saying.
No,
I'm not saying you have to do that, but maybe somebody who's
a
watching
lot of games,
has a lot of time in their hands.
like every game that doesn't want to give money to the Apple Store should do that because of Fortnite, right? Like it's like if you have enough money if you're big enough to make a difference in app, and what it would come down to is Apple reserving the right in their terms of service to make exceptions to those things.
Well, I think the issue with Apple, did Fortnite win that case? Or is that ongoing still?
That's probably ongoing still, I'm sure.
I think the big issue with Apple wasn't that Apple kicked Fortnite out of the store because they didn't want to pay the insane 30% fucking fee that you have to
It's
pay
absolutely
for people to make
disgusting.
money off your shit in the App Store. The issue is that Apple also protects their iPhone, and I don't think it's possible to sideload apps without like breaking a whole bunch of the phone.
Yeah, you're not allowed to access your own file system.
Yeah, so I think that's the big issue, is that monopolistic aspect of, you control the hardware and you control the store, and you're taking an exorbitant cut from people that are listing apps in the store.
Yet they're not in an antitrust lawsuit, which is like Google is, Microsoft's been, but Apple somehow is not. Apple is worth, the last I looked, which is like years ago, they were worth more than the GDP of the United Kingdom. Like, which is just like, okay, and you're scared to do an antitrust lawsuit with this company. But anyway, going back to the TikTok thing, I can't think, there should be some other things. Like basically, they should be able to say, okay, well, how about this? You can stay on these services of ours, or the government could say, okay, we will give you some more time if you're open source, like release your source code and update it. It's not that huge of a threat. It's not like the app itself is like this super, the super secret recipe or something. It's like,
Wouldn't that release their algorithm code though as well? Which is what my understanding when listening to the TikTok is that that's one thing that the TikTok, like America Incorporated, is really concerned about specifically, this is why they don't want ByteDance to have to release this stuff and to breach their full relationship with ByteDance. Is they want specifically to be able to use that algorithm because it's such a tried and true algorithm. And it seems like Insta-Reels hasn't quite managed as good of an algorithm necessarily.
Oh no, TikTok's way better. TikTok, man.
That's my understanding.
And let me just say this. I'll say this. I'm probably the biggest tech dummy of the four of us. So like, I don't know how the hell TikTok works. I don't know any of that shit. Like I know roughly what an algorithm is, but if you ask me all this, I won't know any of it. But what I can say is they are probably the best app for getting you addicted to an app because they can find what you like the quickest and bring that to you. And that's something well, you're not on it.
No, I mean, I've tried TikTok early on, and I've given it plenty of The one that finds me the quickest is YouTube Shorts. Weirdly.
YouTube Shorts. They've gotten
built
better. They
different.
have gotten better. I found that
Psychopaths.
Instagram has always just been behind the ball. Instagram Reels has always been behind the ball. I do like YouTube Shorts a lot.
I mean, I'm not that big of a. In fact, on my channel, it's at like YouTube's very, very like make more shorts. It'll bring people. And it does add a lot of subscribers to your channel. But one thing that I noticed and that I'm terrified of is I don't want to build an audience because all these algorithms aren't perfect. They have a lot of problems and they're constantly being adjusted. And in YouTube's case, if somebody's watching, if I gained 20,000 new shorts followers, just because if I went hard and hired an editor to make a bunch of shorts of my content and just made it more digestible in a minute, what would end up happening is that 10 or 20,000 or however many new subscribers, when they actually tried to watch my long form content, they're so used to short form content that they would click off of it right away, and then the algorithm would say, oh, this content's not good, and then it would not show it to as many people for it, and it would start tanking videos. And it's like that you really have to pick one or the other, which is also interesting because so many people on TikTok are talking about starting a YouTube channel, not for shorts, but for long form content. And it's like, you might as well like get into carpentry or some other trade because it's so different.
Yeah.
Like it's.
Yeah. I mean, when we asked like if we're for the TikTok ban, to be clear, I would say I'm like 55% for the TikTok ban. I could really be moved to either side because I think both sides have a very compelling argument. I think the concern about China and its capacity to propagandize through a Chinese Chinese own that like the people, ByteDance is a Chinese company, but specifically the relationship that the CCP has with those companies, I think is concerning. But I would say even more so, we're probably in like a new form of, I would almost call it like Cold War, where it seems like the propaganda war machine is how democracies, because misinformation seems to be one of the best ways to topple democracies in a current climate, right? And so I think not so much the security side that compels me, but that's also, I don't understand it as well. What does concern me is the pushing of certain propaganda sides from China. But I think the First Amendment argument for TikTok itself is also a pretty compelling argument, right? Mm-hmm. Which creates this question of being like, well, why does TikTok not have the right for First Amendment, but Insta Reels or YouTube?
What gives Meta the right to propagandize your people and not TikTok is because they're originating from China and not from the Silicon Valley?
Yeah, well, because in the United States it's illegal to propagandize or take direction from a foreign company without declaring it, right?
Yeah.
Because of FARA, the Foreign Agents Registration Act. I think the biggest thing that I find compelling about why TikTok is a unique problem is, let's say that Georgia said, I want to do something really bad to every user that subscribes to Benn Jordan's YouTube channel, and I'm going to ask Facebook and TikTok and Twitter for their information on those users. And let's say that they bully them. They're like, we're not going to allow you to have this in our state. And they're like, okay, fine, you give them the information. And then everybody finds out about this in the United States. Well, if other states don't go after you, at the very least, the federal government's coming after you. And it's probably going to be maybe even a criminal issue. It's going to be a big deal. And at the end of the day, somebody's going to have to answer for that. If that exact same thing happens with a Chinese company or the CCP requesting this from ByteDance, you have no accountability. What are you going to do? The United States isn't going to sue China and the World Trade Organization.
Yeah, but don't you make that agreement when you sign the user agreement, knowing that your information, your algorithm, anything you put in there could be just given to the Chinese government? I mean, do they just need to make that, like, just put the hammer and sickle on the front sign-up page, like, this will be property of the CCP, are you cool with that? And if you click I agree, you agree. You're agreeing to that. You're agreeing to enter into an agreement with a company that operates out of China, knowing how China is.
Does a 12-year-old know how China is, though?
But should a parent be letting their 12-year-old get a TikTok account without their permission? The parent should know what China's doing, and the parent should say, I don't want you to have a TikTok account.
Does a parent know what China's doing? I don't know if anybody, I mean, I feel like people don't even know
what China's doing? I don't think anybody knows.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't know if people even know what their state governments or what the United States do. Like the idea that a parent needs to
also, we're going up there to do stupid dances. Like, we're doing the brat dance. Like how much national security information are you really gathering from kids dancing on
stuff
TikTok?
like that? Not much. But when it comes to tracking where Uyghurs are because you want to go after them, and then you're able to get that information from the TikTok's app because there's GPS.
I don't necessarily think that it's the information that we're giving as much as using the algorithm to drive consensus on certain things in certain directions, just from seeing what X did. So when the day, literally, if you look at an algorithm assessment of X, the day that Elon Musk announced that when he endorsed Donald Trump, the algorithm started boosting right-wing stuff I mean, like 5 to 1, 6 to 1.
Can I just say that I get a lot more reach on my tweets now that the election's over?
Yeah.
For some reason,
reason.
I
Yeah.
don't want to be a conspiracy theorist, but there's a reason why I get a larger.
It's not a conspiracy. That there's evidence. This is what happened. Like 100%. Everybody got buried. Like if you had a right-wing thing to say that supported Donald Trump, you did better in the algorithm than somebody who didn't. And Elon Musk had like his tweets got on everybody's page. I had him muted, and he would show up on my thing. And so
Notification, yeah.
on my newsfeed. And so, like, imagine what would happen if, I don't know, we ended up getting, I mean, because we are pretty close to a military conflict with China when you consider how many aircraft carriers and bases we're setting up around there, just anticipating what's going to happen in Taiwan. And whether, obviously we could agree or disagree that we should be involved, but imagine what TikTok will become a very valuable propaganda tool.
TikTok will be shut down if America goes to war with China.
TikTok's gonna be shut down on the
Immediately.
19th.
Like it'll be
no matter
national
what.
security.
Yeah, it's going to be shut down in 5 days.
Well, if it's not shut down in 5 days, if it continues on through, if they win at the Supreme Court, if Trump saves TikTok, because I did so well there, that's what he said, right? And if he saves TikTok and it exists, if we were to go to war with China over Taiwan, day one, the national security state would say, we're cutting off all Chinese apps, they're cut off, no more TikTok.
Sure, but they would have all the data preceding that exact date anyways.
Yeah, but I mean, again, they have data of like what? Americans dancing on TV. It's not like we're putting classified military secrets on TikTok lives. Like it's not the same thing.
I think that, so the issue that I'm going to bring this up as an online person that gets stalked way too much, and maybe Ben has the same issue, is that like when you put out a lot of information, people don't realize like, if the reason why an average person, it doesn't matter what you put out, is because nobody's really going through all your shit to figure out what's going on. But if you're under a microscope, people could find out a surprising amount of shit.
I had a lot of my shit come out. Trust me, people comb through every Facebook post I ever made.
For sure, yeah, absolutely.
And
And then there are things where it's like I see, and it's so funny the difference just being a large creator versus other people. Like I'll see people who are like streaming, like walking through their house, and I'm just like, the idea of like, you have an open monitor there, who the fuck knows what's on the monitor? You've got like a piece of mail here, is your fucking address on this? Do they know who you're like? There are so many things like, I could never imagine doing an open walkthrough of my house on a phone. That's like the shit that I would have to fucking like look at every single thing and prepare it before even turning my phone off or something like that.
Are you generally like undoxable, like in your mind?
Absolutely not. I get doxxed instantaneously.
Okay.
There's a million databases of like IDs where like they're open on the back end and somebody's able to access it to find out. Like it's impossible. I had a guy who sent me, when I lived in when I lived in Huntington Beach, I had a fan who emailed me, and he was friendly about it because it was like a for fun thing. But he emailed me, and based on the fact that I said that I'd moved to Huntington Beach, and because he saw out my window, like he was able to figure out like the fucking floor I was on and what apartment building I was on because of just like a building in the background, and not because there was like a name on it or whatever, but just because of like other random shit that I'd said. So if you were a person who is 24 and you worked in the military and somebody like wants to, I don't know, maybe you caught somebody's interest and they're looking at your shit. And now with, I hate to do the boomer thing, but now with AI, like you could probably automate a lot of these processes. This is a guy who's like super pro-conservative and pro-Trump and wants to defend our country. And you find out that like, well, when I looked through the whole database I got of this dude, when he was 13, 14, he was making a lot of really sussy gay jokes with a friend or a lot of really sussy racial jokes with a friend. And I bet that if we dug through a little bit on this, we could find enough that I could contact this guy and be like, hey, you're probably something, or you have an opinion, or you are something you don't want people to know about. Just like, don't do this, or fuck around a little bit with this. Like, there's a lot of levers of control on. Imagine for 170 million people what you could find.
Okay, but and I don't want to be the conspiracy theorist, the guy who says that, but we're probably doing that all over the world right now as the United States government.
Good, then let other countries fuck with us if they figure that out.
And the same thing with China. Like, what are we going to do to China? Like, what? Just
well, we probably just shouldn't let them have unfettered access to 170 million people's worth of.
But those people choose to do it. That's the thing.
I don't care if they do. They shouldn't be allowed to choose to do it.
That's the problem.
What?
They should be allowed to choose to do it.
Fuck
I should
no.
be allowed. I should be allowed to give any information to anybody that I want to, so long as it's not national security related.
But the problem is everything can be national security related. That's the issue.
I don't find teenagers dancing to Brat to be national security.
No, but when a
That's my
teenager grows
thing.
up and he becomes the guy who's working at the plant for your ISP, and now there's a bunch of blackmail shit on him, and he's like, I want Destiny's internet.
Let me use a little bit different. Let me use a different example. 5 years pass where we actually go to war with China. There is somebody who flies an attack helicopter And let's say we had soldiers here, and he was going to, this is somebody who was in a certain battalion that was going to do that. Using all of that data that you have from TikTok, that was one of the people dancing when they were 14 years old, and now you can hold his family hostage and get him to intentionally sabotage the helicopter.
Or you don't even have to hold his family hostage. Imagine you're running a mission like that, and you just get like a fucking email, and the guy's name is like a super Chinese name, and it's just like a picture of your parents. It's like, fuck, I don't know what the fuck this means. Like, even without doing the extra steps of holding somebody hostage, who the fuck knows? And this might have been a person who was full on like, I don't care if China has my info, it doesn't matter. Like, how? Because again, if you've been like a big internet person, there's an insanely random thing you could say that like 3 years later somebody connects the dots and something, you're like, Jesus Christ.
But even China, and it's kind of like China is such like in that argument, like the biggest hole in that argument is China, because I feel like an insurgency in the United States, just in a civil war situation, or just like, some sort of I feel like that exact same thing would happen. I mean, well, that's exactly, like if I was part of one Civil War army and my neighbor was part of another one and he flew that helicopter, I'd go over there and prevent him from getting in the helicopter in the first place rather than shooting at a helicopter. Like that's
but at
what
the very
insurgency's
least,
like.
if we didn't like this type of information being held indefinitely,
Right.
we can at least go after companies that are domestic. You have no control over China companies.
Yeah, I mean, for me, so the other solution that you see all the time is that TikTok can just divest. They can divest and get bought out by, and that's really what I think in my conspiratorial like tinfoil hat theory, is I really think that Meta or somebody else wants to buy TikTok.
You don't have to tinfoil hat it. I think that banning TikTok for military reasons, I think that's actually okay. But I absolutely think that right now, fucking Meta and X have a ton to stand to gain from that being shut down. Absolutely.
Well, they want it to be shut down, or they want to be forced to divest into one of these companies.
They won't divest. TikTok will be gone. None of that is getting gone. No. It's TikTok will be gone on the 19th. They're not going to sell to anybody. ByteDance is never releasing that, and because it would just help American companies, they wouldn't do it. But Instagram, especially, YouTube Shorts as well, and X have everything to gain. Imagine how lucky you are that one of your largest fucking competitors is getting shut down. Which is very irritating to me.
But the issue is that the conspiracy theory can be true, and it can also still be a military security risk
unfortunately.
Right? That's the problem. Is like, yes, I'm sure Zuckerberg is like literally like salivating at the chops for the 19th. Like he's so excited, but that doesn't change the fact that like data and like propaganda being accessible is just like not good.
I don't know. Maybe it's because I'm the non-tech guy here that I'm just like, I don't see much to worry about. But of course, I don't know anything that's going on in the back end really, because I don't know all. Like I said, I'm not a big tech guy, so I don't know like how dangerous that information is. All I see is like, hey, I'm doing the brat dance, or I'm watching somebody make funny short films.
It's just imagine like I think about like
and they do it and they do it better. That's the thing, is they did it better. Like if YouTube Shorts could have brought me that information and made that algorithm the way I wanted it, I would have watched YouTube Shorts. I would have never gotten a TikTok. Yep. But Instagram Reels never did it the way I wanted. YouTube never did it the way I exactly want it. TikTok does. TikTok provides the service that much better. Like when I can tell you right now, if I hit my TikTok, I'm going to find at least 4 Atlanta Snow Day videos in my first 15 things, because I've liked at least 3 or 4 of those Atlanta Snow Day videos. They know. And like, why can't American companies just get better at it and then win in the marketplace of ideas? Like, why can't Facebook just get better? Why can't X just get better?
Yeah,
why can't YouTube get better and just provide better content?
Can I ask you a spicy question? Why can't the Libertarian Party just get better and win at
I can tell you why. Because they've been gamed. Because the two-party system is very much rigged into controlling that. Just look at the fact that the only 2 parties that get taxpayer-funded primaries that are instant media gatherers are the Democrats and Republicans. My taxpayer money is taken out of my pocket to fund Donald Trump's primary race or to fund Joe Biden's primary race. And they get all the media from that. So they get 6 months of media ahead of time. On top of the ballot access, the media blackout. I mean, there's lots of reasons why, if all things being equal, I think the Libertarian Party would be more competitive than we are. Would we be the greatest market share? Maybe, maybe not, I don't know. We certainly would have a lot more than 1 to 3% if we weren't actively being pushed down. And so
I feel like it would look more like UK Parliament or something. Like
Oh yeah, we'd have a lot more coalition building, that kind of stuff. And I support this thing called the Voter Bill of Rights. It was created by a guy named Lars Mapstead, who I ran against. and I stole it from his platform because it was the best part of his platform. And I thought, hey, let's make this part of my platform. But in all seriousness, it's about ways we can improve the way we can vote, how we can make it cheaper to run for office. Like, your filing fee should not be more than 1% of your yearly rate running for that office. If you paid $175,000, it should never be more than $1,750 to be able to file to run for office. But when I ran for Congress, $6,000 just to put your name on the ballot and even run. That's a barrier. There's lots of barriers out there. If we got rid of, we'd have more like a UK style parliament. It'd be awesome.
Yeah. Okay, one last good, like, this is just a fun libertarian question. Should you be able to own land?
Yes. Yes.
Not. Just because the argument is that I own 7 acres of land, which means that everybody else can't go on it if I don't allow them, and I have this power to stop them from traveling across my land. Would we be more free if we weren't able to own the land? I mean, I own land, so obviously I've already sort of sided on that, but that's one of my favorite, like, philosophical, like...
One of the libertarian philosophical questions that we ask all the time is, do you actually own land? Because if you don't pay property taxes, you get the land taken away from you.
I am leasing it from the government.
You're leasing it from the government. And that's the sad thing about it, is you don't ever actually own the land. Nobody does, because you pay property tax.
Yeah.
Sure, but depending on how philosophical you want to get on that, literally nobody ever owns land ever, because it's only as owned as you can defend it, right? Like, if you have a guy with a bigger set of rifles next to you, even in a perfect ANCAP utopia, you only own that land insofar as he's allowing you to.
Yeah, this is why we have contract law. This is why we have those basic frameworks. This is why I'm a minarchist and not an anarchist. And I will have this debate with anarchists for the rest of my life, because I'm a libertarian and we tend to hang out with each other a lot and we drink a lot at night sometimes. Like, I had a whole 5-hour thing over moonshine, over minarchism versus anarchism. And, by the end of it, all we agreed is that the other one's a dumbass. And so, it'll be that constant argument we have. But I believe we do have to have that framework, so we don't have just the guy with the biggest guns controlling everything, because it's kind of the way we do it internationally right now. We're the guy with the biggest gun right now, too. So, And
China, we don't have to pay you if we don't want. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of... I always, when I see our debt going up and up and up, I'm always just like, I feel like we're just going to inflate our debt away intentionally. Sort of, I think we talked about this yesterday with private equity, just buying up everything and hedging. Or we're just going to continue investing in military stuff and be like, well, why don't you take it from us then?
Oh, utopia. No, that just sounds not great.
Utopian? That red light's still on, right? I can't see it from here.
Yes.
Okay.
Everything's red, yeah.
No, you're good. I see it. Just want to make sure that was.
We're good.
Well,
All right.
I think we've completely bored your dog. She's completely fallen asleep. She's been very relaxed this entire time.
Yeah, she's been a good girl. Mm-hmm. Before we all get up, I should put my phone up there and take a camera shot.
Do what you gotta do. Run real fast down the stairs. That'll be.
Oh no, I can do it from my.
Oh shoot!
Technology. Mm-hmm. Nice.
Where's the camera up there?
It's his phone.
You mean you don't have to? You mean you don't have to get like a broomstick with a nail on it to hit the?
I thought you meant you already had a camera up there that you could just hit. And I was like,
no, yeah, I've been filming every moment of this. Yeah.
Dude, I'm a libertarian. I'm paranoid to believe that I'm on film all the time, everywhere I go.
Okay.
Yeah, go for it.
The news is divided. Ground News puts it back together, so you can see how many sources are reporting on any breaking story, where they fall on the political spectrum, how reliable they are, and who owns them. Compare headlines and read full articles to see which details are prioritized, exaggerated, or left out entirely. Because the more we understand the media, the more we'll understand each other. Visit ground.news to learn more.